Chapter 745. Releasing evil energy. Lin Feng's back was facing his opponent. Lin Feng's black Chong Pao was contrasting with the endless whiteness of the area. The Tianqi snowy mountain was cold in terms of temperature, and Lin Feng was cold in terms of temperament. "Get lost," said Lin Feng. That person had told him to get lost before, but now he had been defeated by Lin Feng. Lin Feng initially wanted to kill him, but in the end he chose not to. The opponent was perfectly aware that Lin Feng had been merciful. He had sensed that death was very near. If Lin Feng hadn't changed his mind, he would have died. The young man immediately left the top of the Tianqi snowy mountain. Everybody was shaking while staring at Lin Feng. He had, just like in his previous battle, defeated his opponent in one sword attack. The most incredible thing was that many cultivators of the same level, of the 8th Xianqi layer, hadn't even seen his sword. Lin Feng had turned into a sword. His sword had turned into him. They had fused together. Lin Feng possessed human earth fusion already, meeting one of the prerequisites necessary to break through to the Tianqi layer. After breaking through to the very top of the Xianqi layer, he would be able to open the way to the Tianqi layer. The human earth fusion was preventing many people from breaking through to the Tianqi layer. That guy is too strong. Apart from the strongest cultivators of the 9th Xianqi layer, nobody can defeat him, I think. His sword intent must be level 3 already, thought the crowd. Nobody proposed to fight against Lin Feng anymore. He was too dangerous. He could eliminate them too easily. "Interesting," whispered a young man with an ancient sword on his back. He was smiling at that moment. He was wearing white clothes, white like snow. He was standing there and looked like he was in fusion with the snow in the surrounding. That person even had some wrinkles from nervousness. They were white too. He looked pure white. Bai Li. The crowd was astonished when they saw that young man. If Bai Li Shui wanted to, he could probably defeat Lin Feng. However, with his reputation he probably wouldn't attack Lin Feng. He could control snow and sword intents and had broken through to the 9th Xianqi layer. He was monstrously strong and very famous in the Tianqi Empire. Bai Li Shi would be amongst the 8 final people. Apart from Bai Li Shi, there were a few other well-known people. For example, there was one outstanding scholar called Han Qiuyu. He also used swords, but he wasn't a sword cultivator. His spirit was extremely particular. It was an extremely rare book. It was said that in the book were many memories belonging to incredibly strong cultivators. People who could deal with him were extremely rare. However, Han Qiuyu was very warm and friendly. He didn't like to challenge people. He was a real intellectual. He had also never showed any feelings for Tianqi Shui, so he had no reason to be angry at Lin Feng. Apart from Tianqi Shui, Bai Li Shi and Han Qiuyu, there were 2 twins, Bai Luo and Huang Quan. They were extremely strong, especially when they fought together against someone. Those 5 people were all at the 9th Xianqi layer. Everyone was convinced that they would make it to the mysterious world. There was a 6th person too, called Qian Yizhan. Qian Yizhan wasn't as strong as the 5 others, but had broken through to the 8th Xianqi layer. However, he was extremely strong and could use sharp needles as weapons. His spirit was a needle spirit. It was also extremely rare. There was no blood when he killed someone. He was very dangerous. Besides, that person had fallen in love with Tianqi Shui. People were convinced that he could deal with Lin Feng and Huang Fulong. Bai Li Shi noticed Lin Feng. "I don't know if Qian Yizhan will try to fight against Lin Feng or not," thought some people, looking at the skinny young man who was seemingly pale and indifferent. That young man's qi was very dangerous. It was precisely Qian Yizhan. However, Qian Yizhan didn't seem to notice the people looking at him. Actually, it was the opposite. He was standing there calmly, as if he hadn't perceived what people around him wanted him to do. Maybe he will become one of the 8 finalists, thought the crowd while looking at Lin Feng. They looked impatient to see the following battles. He was the odd one out. He had been able to eliminate a cultivator of the 9th Xianqi layer using one sword attack. He was maybe extraordinarily strong, maybe strong enough to go to the mysterious world along with Tianqi Shui. Some people had belittled Lin Feng and had challenged him. Those who had criticized him were now eating their words. A short time before they had called him arrogant. Now they had seen how strong Lin Feng was, so they didn't say anything anymore. "Let's attack together. No matter how strong he is, we can defeat him together, even kill him. I don't think he can resist if we join hands," said someone coldly. He had looked glum. He had found out that Lin Feng was a big threat to them. Even if he hadn't humiliated Tian Qishui a moment before, Lin Feng still had to be eliminated. With his strength, Lin Feng had awoken a feeling of jealousy in people's hearts. They wanted to eliminate him as quickly as possible, some of them even wanted to kill him. Lin Feng suddenly turned around and looked at the one who had just said that. Join hands to eliminate him? Lin Feng's coldness became extremely violent in his heart. Lin Feng couldn't stand it when people wanted to kill him. He had shown mercy to his opponent before, but that merciful feeling just disappeared from his heart. Lin Feng was influenced by the evil sword, and that person's words awoke that evilness again. Indeed, let's fight together against him. We can easily kill him. Yes, let's do it. Chapter 746. Sharp Needles. What's going on? What a terrifying evil energy, thought the crowd at the foot of the mountain when they sensed his evil energy. They couldn't help but frown. People were realizing that Lin Feng wasn't normal, he was like a demon. Should we stop him? Asked a strong cultivator to the old man who was in charge of the exam. He was scared that the exam could end up in a bloodbath. Those people were all pillars of the Tianqi Empire. They hadn't even gone to the mysterious world. Dying there would be such a pity. No, said the old man while shaking his head. Everything is justified. They wanted to kill him, so he turned into a killer. If it were you, would you let those people off? After that person heard the old man, he remained silent. The old man continued, if you want to kill someone but you are not strong enough, you will get killed instead. That boy has a demon in his heart. If he is talented enough, we can help him control that demon. The old man then turned his head to Lin Feng, who looked terrifying. If you want to kill me, die, said Lin Feng in a cold way. He then shook his hands and some rumbling sound spread in the air. A terrifying deadly evil hand moved towards one of those who had just attacked him by surprise. The evil energy crashed on that person. It was ice cold. Break! Shouted that person furiously as his energy crashed on Lin Feng's evil hand attack. Die, said Lin Feng. His voice sounded like that of a demon. His hand attack disappeared and an evil black beam of light shot out towards that person's head and then exploded. That person had died in a flash. The others were trembling in fear. Lin Feng was an insane demon. They had to block him. Everybody, let's do it together. Otherwise he will kill all of us one after the other, brawled someone furiously. Everybody nodded as they all released an oppressive energy which surrounded Lin Feng's body. Pure qi was whistling in the air and it was scary. They were joining hands because Lin Feng was too dangerous. Lin Feng turned around and some black beams of light emerged out of his eyes, filled with murderous intentions. Let's kill him together. Furious whistling snow. Ice and snow were furiously moving towards Lin Feng. The atmosphere started freezing. All those attacks were moving towards Lin Feng together. Snow condensation, shouted someone else furiously. Ice streaked across the sky and then surrounded Lin Feng's body. Then he was frozen in the middle of an ice cube. Die! Shouted the others while their energies were bombarding the atmosphere towards Lin Feng. Boom 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 boom. Terrifying energies assaulting Lin Feng's body. They all wanted to kill him. He's dead. He's maybe extremely strong as a demon, but with so many monstrously strong cultivators fighting against him, he will die. What a pity, thought some people in the crowd. Lin Feng was definitely going to die. It was just a matter of time. Zero. Some physical strength was making the ice break. A black silhouette appeared. Lin Feng's black eyes appeared again and terrifying evil black lights continued twinkling around his body. He hadn't died? Burn, said Lin Feng coldly. A black fire ignited around his body and then spread all around him. It was burning all the fists that were attacking him. Ah! Someone gave a blood-curdling shriek. Immediately after, all the others started emitting horrible shrieks. Those people were burning. What a terrifying fire. Besides, it was black, not like normal fire. It was an evil fire. Fire intent. The strong cultivators were astonished. Lin Feng understood 3 sorts of intent. Sword intent, wind intent and fire intent. He could use 3 sorts of intent. How incredible. Besides, they were all at least level 2. That was astonishing. Many people found it difficult to understand one sort of intent. Many cultivators of the 9th Xian Qi layer didn't even understand one. What a monstrous power of comprehension. When the crowd became clear-headed again, Lin Feng had suddenly disappeared. A silhouette was twinkling in the air just like an illusion. Boom, 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 boom. Terrifying pounding sounds spread in the air. The crowd only saw a silhouette getting crushed and crashing into the snow of Tianqi immediately after. That person turned into an ice statue. All those strong cultivators were dying one after the other. Lin Feng had turned into a black beam of light, and then gradually reappeared. All those who initially wanted to kill Lin Feng had died. None of them were left. Lin Feng had destroyed all of them. Wind. What a terrifying wind agility technique. Lin Feng was so fast that nobody could follow him with their eyes. They couldn't see him clearly when he was moving. Apart from his blinding speed, he was also extremely strong and cruel. He could kill people in one punch. Each time someone sensed a wind brush away near them, another person had already died a few seconds before. It must be an agility technique, he's probably learned an incredible one. Thought the strong cultivators of Tianqi they could recognize that Lin Feng's agility technique was a Tian level 1. Just how mysterious was Lin Feng? Come down, said a voice at that moment. It was extremely loud. Some people took advantage when Lin Feng had drawn everybody's attention to attack others by surprise. Many people were attacking others by surprise. More and more people were getting eliminated. Get lost. Go back. Many people were attacking, the situation was becoming chaotic and even apocalyptic. Lin Feng was still standing there, surrounded by a terrifying qi. However, nobody was attacking him anymore, nobody dared. Lin Feng was too strong. He could easily kill people of the 8th Xianqi layer and even ordinary cultivators of the 9th Xianqi layer. Chapter 747. Lin Feng in fury. Lin Feng moved aside and protected Tang Yuyu. An evil black light then started illuminating the atmosphere again. However, the black evil energy couldn't destroy the needles which penetrated into Lin Feng's body, but they got stuck in there and couldn't go any further. How are you? Asked Lin Feng to Tang Yuyu. Tang Yuyu took out some bottles of alcohol and drank some. In a flash, her pale face turned red again. Don't worry about me, I give up. Lin Feng jumped in the air, carrying Tang Yuyu and put her aside next to Huang Fulong. He asked, Da Haichong, help me protect her for a second. All right, said Huang Fulong while nodding. His eyes were twinkling, he looked tough and fierce. If there's a problem you can give up and go down, said Lin Feng. Immediately after, he abruptly turned around and threw himself at Qian Yizhan. Lin Feng's eyes looked extremely sharp. Qian Yizhan could sense that his needles couldn't penetrate Lin Feng's body. Lin Feng's defense was frightening. Break die. Qian Yizhan's eyes were twinkling with cold lights. Qian Yizhan then moved his 10 fingers which diffused silver lights, like needles. They moved straight towards Lin Feng while emitting whistling sounds. Destroy. Lin Feng released a gigantic black hand attack which launched towards Qian Yizhan. It was emitting some terrifying whistling sounds as well. That gigantic hand didn't stop the needles. They crossed through it and continued moving towards Lin Feng. Could those needles cross through anything? Lin Feng was moving forwards as before, he was fearless. His gigantic black hand descended from the sky and rumbling sounds spread in the air, as if a demon had been falling down to the earth. The atmosphere was filled with evil energy. A terrifying strength landed on the needles and made them weaken. They even disappeared. Let's attack too, let's eliminate those two first, shouted someone furiously. Many people were taking advantage of the chaotic situation to go and attack Tang Yuyu. She was injured so she was easy prey. Huang Fulong shouted furiously and released a terrifying and violent qi, opening the way in front of him. A terrifying hand attack then projected forwards. Snowflakes and sand were mixing together. In a flash, all those who were attacking Tang Yuyu by surprise were projected away and flew off in the horizon. Endless openings, shouted Qian Yizhan furiously. An endless quantity of needles appeared on his body. There was a myriad of needles still floating in the air too. They were coming from every side and moving straight towards Lin Feng. The endless openings attack was terrifying. If those needles reached Lin Feng, he would die. Evil shadow, shouted Lin Feng while joining his hands. Many shadows appeared. They looked like demons as they then turned into a multitude of silhouettes moving in all directions. Some sharp sound spread in the air as needles crashed into the demons. Lin Feng moved his hands and a terrifying evil strength emerged. It seemed as solid as a mountain. Those needles were sent flying away. Even though the endless openings attack was supposed to make the needles penetrate into everything, when facing a terrifying strength such as Lin Feng, they couldn't move forwards. Back! Shouted Qian Yizhen furiously. The needles came back to life and emitted buzzing sounds in the air, but then they continued moving back towards Lin Feng. Wind agility technique, said Lin Feng with the voice of a demon. Lin Feng jumped forwards and oppressed the needles in front of him. Qian Yizhen's face became desperate as he shouted furiously, "Heart injection!" He had released a terrifying needle light which was aimed straight at Lin Feng's heart. At that moment they were a few centimeters away from his heart. "Destroying demon," said Lin Feng darkly. A terrifying and gigantic demon light then illuminated the atmosphere. His entire body turned into an authentic demon. It seemed like he could annihilate everything and nobody could stop him. Ding ding dong dong. Some metallic sounds spread in the air and penetrated into the body of the evil demon. However, they were stuck in the superficial part of the skin and didn't move further. The evil demon's hand moved towards Qian Yizhen's throat. Qian Yizhen finally looked scared. How was that possible? He had never lost to anyone before. Each time he fought, people died. Even people who were stronger than him usually couldn't escape from his endless openings attack. He could even cut the rain with those needles. If they penetrated into somebody's body, they could cripple people's blood systems. He had attacked Tang Yuyu before and her blood system had been touched, which had made her unable to continue battling. However, Lin Feng's defense was incredible. The endless openings attack couldn't affect him, even if the needles pierced through his skin. Lin Feng was scary. Qian Yizhen retreated backwards when he saw Lin Feng's hands filled with evil energy move towards him. However, Lin Feng's demon's hands were getting closer and closer. They really looked like a demon's hands as they were moving towards his throat. Suddenly, Qian Yizhen turned around and tried to escape. Thur, thur, thur. The sound of his needles resonated behind him, making him start shaking violently. He was the one who had released those needles a moment before, but now they were penetrating into his body. Blood was splashing out of his mouth. He turned his head and saw Lin Feng's ice-cold pupils. Finally, he was understanding what it was like to be afraid to die. He understood what it was like to make a mistake. He had surprisingly made a big mistake. The crowd at the foot of the mountain was astonished. Qian Yizhen's needles were terrifying. They had thought that Lin Feng was going to die in a tragic way. However, even a strong cultivator like Qian Yizhen seemed powerless in front of Lin Feng. With one attack, Lin Feng had grabbed his throat. Qian Yizhen was shaking. If Lin Feng released some physical strength, he would be able to crush his throat. "Let me go," said Qian Yizhen. He was speaking with great difficulty. Lin Feng had even lifted him by the throat. Qian Yizhen was hanging in the air and suffocating. He grabbed Lin Feng's hands with his hands, trying to make him let loose of him. He was terrified. He didn't look cruel like before. He had the feeling that death was running towards him as if he had offended a demon. Oh no! He defeated Qian Yizhen, thought the others who were fighting against Tang Yuyu and Huang Fulong. There the situation looked bad. Lin Feng started spinning abruptly and through Qian Yizhen's body, which streaked through the sky like a meteorite and violently crashed against another person's body. They died on the spot from the violence of the crash. Loud rumbling sounds were spreading in the air. Lin Feng hadn't actually thrown him. He was still holding his body. What a cruel guy, he went mental, thought the crowd with great surprise. Qian Yizhen's circulatory system was destroyed. His heart, liver, spleen, lungs and kidneys were bleeding as well as his 7 apertures. "I beg you, save me," said Qian Yizhen, whose eyes were bleeding. He raised his hands towards Lin Feng and was begging him to save his life. Lin Feng glanced at him. Save him? He had tried to kill him with his needles. His prey had become his predator. Was begging useful? Could Lin Feng have mercy on him? Boom boom boom. Another collision sound spread in the air. Qian Yizhen just sensed that his internal viscera were being crushed. He didn't look like a human being anymore. He looked like a bunch of crushed meat, and the one against whom he had crashed also looked like he was agonizing. "Escape! Quickly!" said the others while running away. They stopped fighting against Tang Yuyu and Huang Fulong. Nobody could get their revenge on Lin Feng. He was terrifying. "No need to leave," said Lin Feng coldly. He then shouted furiously, "Die!" A terrifying sword light emerged in the atmosphere. Qian Yizhan, who was still in Lin Feng's hand, was immediately lacerated. Those who were around also got cut by the sword light. Cultivators of the 7th and 8th Xianqi layer couldn't withstand a single attack. They couldn't resist Lin Feng's terrifying sword intent. If Lin Feng attacked them, they would die in a flash. Boom, boom, boom. The sword qi and the evil hands kept moving around. His body turned into an illusion. He was using his 9 days Wen Qi Tian level agility technique. The crowd had the sensation that a demon was flying around them like a hurricane. Those who had been attacking Tang Yuyu and Huang Fulong were all dead. It was a massacre. The crowd at the foot of the mountain was shaking. Lin Feng was scary. The strong cultivators of Tianqi had noticed Lin Feng. They needed to purify his body from the demon. Then they would help him become much stronger. He would probably become terrifyingly strong. Lin Feng could use such a variety of skills and techniques at such a high level. Using them appropriately, he would become a huge threat to others. Nobody would be able to stop him. Chapter 748. The 8 extremely strong cultivators. Lin Feng landed next to Tang Yuyu and coldly glanced at the crowd. Those who were looking at Lin Feng couldn't help but stumble backwards. They didn't dare look him in the eyes. He was too scary. Lin Feng, you're very strong. You're almost as strong as me, said Huang Fulong. With his simple mind, he hadn't noticed that Lin Feng had turned into a demon. Not bad, said Lin Feng, nodding at Huang Fulong when he saw that Tang Yuyu was healing her wounds on the edge of the mountain. Even though Huang Fulong wasn't very smart, he was really strong. His evil eyes were twinkling and his body was surrounded by evil energies. The others were still fighting and the battle looked apocalyptic. Lin Feng felt the urge to kill as he watched them. Lin Feng, said Tang Yuyu, opening her eyes. She could sense Lin Feng's coldness. Even though the stone tablet was restricting the evil energies, they could explode at any moment. After the violence of what happened last time, Lin Feng didn't need to unsheathe the evil sword to use the evil energies. Tang Yuyu had hoped that Lin Feng wouldn't turn into a demon. She didn't want him to kill everyone around them without thinking, all because of her. She wanted to see Lin Feng smiling again, just like the little sunshine he had been in the past. Lin Feng saw what Tang Yuyu was feeling. His evil energies weakened. He turned his head and looked at her. She was deathly pale. Stay next to me, Lin Feng, Tang Yuyu said as gently as possible. Lin Feng shivered. He remained silent and nodded though. His evil energies almost completely disappeared. Take care of your wounds, said Lin Feng. Tang Yuyu smiled back resplendently and closed her eyes again. Many people were looking at them. Those who wanted to attack forgot about it. Nobody dared offend Lin Feng. Otherwise he would turn into a crazy demon again and drown them in another murderous frenzy. It was too dangerous to fight against him. It was better to attack the others who looked weaker. Tianqi Shui was also looking at Lin Feng. His strength seemed terrifying when he had turned into a demon. Was Lin Feng using his real strength when he turned into a demon? Without the demon appearance, was he just as amazing? The battles continued for a while. Lin Feng had already killed so many people by himself. Coupled with the other battles, there were only a little more than 20 people left. Nobody dared fight against Tianqi Shui, even though she was participating to the battles too. Han Xiuyu, Bai Lixi, the twins Bai Luo and Huang Quan were together. Those 4 people were considered as the strongest cultivators by the crowd. They had the highest chances of being selected to go to the mysterious world. With Tianqi Shui, they amounted to 5 people. Then, there were 3 other people who had to be selected. However, it seemed like nobody could offend the young man who had turned into a demon. With the injured girl, Tang Yuyu, and the simple-minded young man who wanted to get married with Tianqi Shui, they amounted to 3 people. Therefore, the crowd thus considered those 8 people had the highest chances of being selected. If nobody attacked them, was there any point in continuing the battle? Apart from those 8, there were more than a dozen other fighters left. They couldn't help but glance at each other. They had made great efforts to make it that far. Stopping now would be a waste. We need to join hands, said someone at that moment. Amongst the others, some of them remained silent while others nodded, but nobody refused. If they didn't join hands, they wouldn't be able to win. They slowly gathered together. Tianqi Shui stayed alone. It seemed like the test had nothing to do with her. She was the holy woman of Tianqi. Fighting against her wouldn't be easy. Besides, Han Xiuyu and Bai Li Shi were forming two one-person groups. Lin Feng and Huang Fulong were protecting Tang Yuyu, thus forming a group of 3 people. The group composed of more than a dozen people. Whom would they fight first? They glanced around looking pensive. Bai Li Shui understood both sword and snow ant net. He was monstrous strong and difficult to defeat. Han Xiuyu had a very strange book spirit which contained some ancient magic powers. Who knew what tricks he had? Bai Luo and Huang Quan the twins were extremely strong when fighting together. Then Lin Feng was terrifying, cruel and emotionless when he turned into a demon. Nobody felt like fighting against him. So who could they contend against? Xiuyu brother, should we help them? Asked Bai Li Shi. Han Xiuyu smiled and said, Bai Li brother, what do you want to do? I think that you, me, Tian Qi Shui, Bai Luo and Huang Quan could go to the mysterious world. Then those two could too. But that injured girl should be eliminated. Then there would be one more open spot. That group of a dozen people could fight for it. What Bai Li Shi meant was that Lin Feng and Huang Fulong were strong enough to go with them to the mysterious world. However, Tang Yuyu was too weak compared to them. She had to be eliminated to make space for another person. Han Xiuyu looked at Lin Feng, shook his head while smiling and said, It has nothing to do with me. If they wanted to eliminate Tang Yuyu, Lin Feng would fight them. They didn't want to offend him. Being able to go to the mysterious world was enough. The rest had nothing to do with them. Bai Luo and Huang Quan also remained silent. They just wanted to save an open spot to the mysterious world for themselves. Just ignore what I said then, said Bai Li Shi, shrugging when he saw that the others only cared about themselves. Too troublesome, let's take them down and make the test finish quickly, said the twins, glancing at the group of a dozen people. They were wasting their time now. Han Xiuyu frowned but smiled. I agree, no problem. Huh. Bai Li Shi glanced at Lin Feng and Tang Yuyu. Then said while smiling, all right, let's go to the mysterious world with them. Then the 4 of them threw themselves at the group of a dozen people. Snow, said Bai Li Shi. Snowflakes started falling from the sky heavily. The big group of people were surrounded. Intellectual dancing swords, said Han Xiuyu indifferently. In his hand appeared an ancient book above which a sword light appeared. He started moving his fingers in his right hand and many rays of sword chi started moving out of his ancient book, rising in the air. They turned into a sharp sword and moved towards the remaining contenders. Let's fight together. Their expressions changed drastically when they saw all those strong cultivators joining hands. They hadn't thought that they would join hands to take them out. That was terrible luck. You have no chance, said Bai Li Shi. Snowflakes were falling faster and faster. That large group of people were unable to open their eyes. They couldn't even see their opponents. A few sword illusions moved towards the group and then they fell down the mountain. Bai Luo and Huang Quan threw themselves at the group of people. Bai Luo's hand descended from the sky and oppressed some people while Huang Quan released some deadly qi. Together they defeated 5-6 people. The battle had just started but it ended just as fast as it had started. Those people were not considered the greatest for nothing. They were all extremely strong. Even if they had broken through to the same cultivation layers as those strong cultivators, there was still a huge difference. Just like when Lin Feng defeated cultivators of the same level as him with ease. Ordinary cultivators of the 9th Xianqi layer couldn't withstand a single attack from Lin Feng. If Lin Feng could do it, others could do it too. In the end, Tian Qi Shui, Bai Li Shui and the 3 others remained. Qian Yizhan had been killed by Lin Feng. Unfortunately, Lin Feng was the odd one out. Nobody could have believed he would make it so far, but he had ended up amongst the 8 final cultivators. Besides, he had managed to get an injured girl through to the end. Nobody had dared attack him in the end. Those 8 people were going to represent the empire of Tianqi in the mysterious world. Chapter 749. Man can conquer nature. The old man slowly rose up in the air and looked at the geniuses at the top of the mountain. He took out some jade stones on which some names were written. Tian Qi Shui, Bai Li Shi, Han Xiuyu, Bai Luo, Huang Quan, Lin Feng, Tang Yuyu, Huang Fulong, said the old man. The jade stones in his hand were twinkling. Lin Feng and Tang Yuyu were astonished. Tang Yuyu and Lin Feng were foreigners in Tianqi, however the old man knew who they were. He had just written their names on those jade stones. How did he know that they were those people? Were those jade stones extraordinary? First, I would like to congratulate you in the name of our empire. Tianqi, you will represent the Tianqi Empire in the mysterious world. Tianqi makes you go through these difficult tests before you go to the mysterious world in order to help you become stronger. However, we also provide you with the best resources. We only have one requirement. Please remember that you are citizens of Tianqi, and that everything you do is for Tianqi, said the old man in a solemn and respectful way. Tianqi was going to help them become stronger without asking for anything in return. For Tianqi, having extremely strong cultivators was already an honor. They were content with that. They wanted to encourage and support their cultivators. They wanted their citizens to become extremely strong cultivators. Of course, that would make the empire much stronger too. Everything we do is for the empire, therefore, if you betray the empire or tarnish its image, you will die, said the old man sharply. The Tianqi Empire wanted its citizens to become strong, and they went to great efforts to supply them. Therefore, they didn't want anyone to betray them and waste their resources. Those jade stones contain your qi. We will keep them inside the mountain. We won't use it unless you betray us, then we will use it to find you, said the old man. Then he shook his hands and the jade stones moved towards the Tianqi snowy mountain and penetrated into its depths. Ice qi froze them and then they disappeared. Tianqi really seemed like they were going to help those 8 become stronger. That was why they were taking things seriously. To Lin Feng, that was a great thing. That was only a question of status. He had no reason to betray Tianqi anyway. And the philosophy of the empire was really respectable and admirable. Lin Feng had lots of esteem for them. They helped their citizens become stronger, and for them it was an honor because it made their empire strong. There might be a day where they would also become the leaders of the empire. Her blood system is injured. Give her this medicine, said the old man while handing a pill to Lin Feng. Lin Feng replied, thank you very much. Lin Feng put the pill in Tang Yuyu's mouth. Tang Yuyu swallowed it and opened her eyes. She looked at Lin Feng in a strange way. That's how you put a pill in somebody's mouth? Said Tang Yuyu furiously. Lin Feng smiled wryly and said, are you feeling any better? When she saw that Lin Feng felt sorry, she said, no effect yet. Maybe I need to wait for my pure qi to stabilize. Come with me, all of you, said the old man. They jumped forwards towards a snowy mountain. The champions looked excited and followed the old man. Being able to finish amongst the 8 best cultivators of the exam was great. They were going to be instructed by the empire. I can help you, said Lin Feng while supporting Tang Yuyu. He looked expressionless as he jumped forwards and followed the others. In the middle of the snowy mountains, a snowy white silhouette appeared and landed on Lin Feng's shoulders. It was Xue Linglong. She glanced at Tang Yuyu looking timid as she lowered her head. However, Xue Linglong caressed Tang Yuyu's face with her small claws and smiled. That vast snowy mountain chain had an infinite number of mountains, all covered with a pure white snow. The old man was leading the way and was running towards the north. They arrived on a mountain whose top was extremely vast. There were many huge walls there. Besides, there were footprints on the snow too. It seemed like it was much colder there, which made Tang Yuyu shake even more. Lin Feng also felt colder. That mountain was so much colder than the other places. Snowflakes were constantly falling. Lin Feng stretched out his hand and grabbed a snowflake. He squeezed it and the snowflake disappeared as if it had never appeared. Lin Feng's hand didn't feel cold either. Illusion. Lin Feng was astonished. That snow was fake. It was an illusion. It wasn't real snow coming from the sky. However, Lin Feng could still feel the coldness in the air. Lin Feng wasn't the only who had discovered that. The others were incredibly talented cultivators as well, and they all gradually discovered that the stone was fake. You noticed, said the old man. He stopped moving forwards. He then landed on the field. One layer of snow was fake and one was real. The others also stopped and landed on the snow. They found that one layer of snow on the ground was fake while another was real. It was extremely strange. Do any of you know how the snowy mountains of Tianqi were created? Asked the old man. People shook their heads. The Tianqi Empire was covered by snow. Extremely cold snow. They all felt cold there, but less as cultivators became stronger. Back in the day, our ancestors came here to practice cultivation in the snow. They were practicing cultivation for 100 years and understood abstruse snow's significance. It kept snowing and snowing. That snow gradually created mountains. Gradually those mountains formed mountain chains. That is how the majority of the mountain chains in Tianqi were created. Then the empire became vaster and became like this, said the old man calmly. However, the strong cultivators were still shivering. Really strong cultivators could practice cultivation for 100 years. For an ordinary cultivator, that was half of their life in terms of pure qi. How impressive! In 100 years, snow had piled up and created gigantic mountains. That snow was created by cultivators and not from the sky, whispered Lin Feng. The old man turned his head and looked at Lin Feng while smiling and nodding. Lin Feng understood things very quickly. That young man could use 3 different sorts of intent. He was indubitably extraordinary. Indeed, strong snow cultivators can make snow fall from the sky. Some cultivators can make real snow fall from the sky while others can make fake snow fall from the sky. If it keeps snowing throughout the year, it is because some extremely strong snow cultivators made it fall while practicing cultivation, explained the old man to Lin Feng, but he was actually talking to everybody. Extremely strong cultivators could use the strength of the sky and make snow rain through the whole year. When I first saw those snowy mountains, I thought they were natural, but I was wrong. Those mountains exist because some extremely strong cultivators could conquer nature and use their strength of natural forces. That is how I came to understand that the snow was artificial, said Lin Feng slowly. The old man's eyes were twinkling. That boy was really smart. Cultivators could conquer nature indeed. We really have to purify that boy's body and clean the evil energies, thought the old man. That young man was so young and could already control 3 different sorts of intent. Besides, he had an extremely strong willpower and determination. He was extraordinary in every way. And Lin Feng had already gone through lots of hardships. Chapter 750. Test. The old man brought the cultivators to a gigantic snowy area. In front of them were simple huts. They weren't as beautiful as palaces Lin Feng had seen. In the middle of those huts was a single hut which seemed larger than the rest. It seemed like there were people practicing cultivation inside, as if those cultivators were studying something. In front of all those relatively young cultivators, there was a praying mat on which a cultivator was sitting. That middle-aged man was muttering some incantations, and the young cultivators were listening. The old man brought the 8 cultivators not far from that hut and said, "Sit down and have a rest." The cultivators sat down. The old man was monstrously strong and had a high social status, but it seemed that in this place, there was somebody with an even higher social status than his own. After a short moment, the one on the praying mat opened his eyes and looked at the 8 cultivators. His eyes were twinkling. It seemed like an ice-cold energy was emerging from his eyes, and it cold enough to freeze them to death. Lin Feng immediately moved in front of Tang Yuyu to block that ice-cold energy. Tang Yuyu was still injured and couldn't use pure qi. She couldn't protect herself from external dangers, so he had to protect her. The ice-cold qi reached them, and then the 7 cultivators were surrounded by a white snow layer. They were half frozen. A terrifying fire appeared and crackled in the atmosphere. Those who had snow on their bodies saw it disappear. Others used different methods to make the ice melt. They were able to see again once the snow melted. They saw the man was walking towards them. "Hunter, you understand me, right?" said the old man while looking at the one who had just come out. The middle-aged man slightly nodded, glanced at the 8 cultivators and said, "Apart from Shui Er, let's look at those 7 people." "Let's start with you," said the middle-aged man while pointing at Bai Li Shi, who immediately stood up, bowed in front of the middle-aged man, and said, "Mister, tell me what I have to do." "Use your full strength to attack me," said the middle-aged man, surprising Bai Li Shi. But he immediately nodded. With just his strength, he couldn't do anything to the middle-aged man anyways. It was just a test to see how strong he really was. Then they would understand his weaknesses. That was a great opportunity, they all had to seize it. Bai Li Shi moved forwards and said, "I don't want to offend you, mister. Use your full strength or you will regret it," said the middle-aged man. Bai Li Shi remained silent and nodded. The middle-aged man had broken through to the Tianqi layer, and could make them suffer without moving a single finger. He looked extremely strong. "All right," said Bai Li Shi while taking out the sword he had from his back. It was a snowy white sword which looked ice-cold. Bai Lishi knew how to use sword and snow intense, and he had broken through to the 9th Qian-Qi layer. He was extremely strong. He moved and suddenly his sword released some terrifying energy. Even more snowflakes invaded the atmosphere. Ice was creeping up his sword. Double intent snow and sword, said Bai Lishi while moving forwards. His sword was like snow, it was twinkling and looked extremely sharp, yet soft and agile like snow. The lights diffused by the sword seemed like they were going to make everyone freeze. Level 2 sword intent and level 3 snow intent. Not bad, said the middle-aged man. The infinity of snow then condensed and shot out with Bai Lishi's sword, making it freeze. When the sword fell on the middle-aged man, it was already halfway frozen in mid-air. It couldn't go any further. How strong, thought the others. As expected, cultivators of the Qian-Qi layer couldn't rival with cultivators of the Tian-Qi layer, including in terms of intent. Shueli Jian is the same type of cultivator as him. He also possesses snow and sword intent. He would be a better teacher for him than myself, said the middle-aged man to the old man. The old man nodded and remained silent. Shueli Jian was a cultivator of the 3rd Tian-Qi layer, that was enough. He would be a good teacher for Bai Lishi. As expected, that small test had the purpose of choosing some appropriate teachers for them. It seemed very important to have an appropriate teacher. Go back, said the middle-aged man to Bai Lishi. Then he asked Han Qiuyu to come. Han Qiuyu was ready as they jumped forwards. Same, use your full strength. All right, said Han Qiuyu while nodding. His spirit appeared from his back. It was an ancient book. Lin Feng was stupefied, a book spirit. It was like his celestial book spirit. However, it wasn't as beautiful as Lin Feng's celestial book spirit. Lin Feng hadn't used his celestial book spirit for a long time. Maybe a new page would appear after breaking through to the Tian-Qi layer. Book, said Han Qiuyu. His book moved and arrived in front of him, in suspension in the air. My book has a sword, said Han Qiuyu in a low voice. A sword appeared in the air. My book has a soul. A light then penetrated into the sword. It seemed like it had its own soul and was emitting buzzing sounds. My book has intent, said Han Qiuyu, and then some monstrously powerful intent penetrated into his sword and emitted whistling sounds. My book has a skill, said Han Qiuyu. He looked exhausted. His sword started swallowing some sharp lights which seemed like they could lacerate the entire atmosphere. That sword started spinning rapidly. It looked like a skill. My book contains the 10,000 things of creation. Upon promulgation, this rule shall be strictly enforced, said Han Qiuyu solemnly. His sword then turned into a beam of light and moved away from the book. In a flash it disappeared and lacerated the sky. It was astonishing. He then turned around and looked at Tian-Qi Shui. She felt like she was going to faint. The hunter looked back at Lin Feng and Tang Yuyu, who was leaning against him, and said, "It seems like she cannot sit the exam." "Indeed, let her practice with me," said Lin Feng. "No problem, come here," said the middle-aged man while nodding. Lin Feng seemed ice-cold. He seemed so much colder than the others. He seemed like he was a stranger to everyone else. He was wondering how strong Lin Feng was now. Lin Feng stood up and slowly walked towards the middle-aged man. His steps were light but seemed heavy, which made the middle-aged man frown. Lin Feng's temperament wasn't like that of the others. He looked glum, hurt, and evil, as if he was about to explode at any moment. "Just like the others, use your strongest attack to attack me," said the hunter. "All right," said Lin Feng while nodding. A metallic sword sound spread in the air as a blood qi invaded the atmosphere. It was ice-cold and seemed like it wanted to slaughter anything in its way. It was his bloodthirsty sword twinkling and diffusing a red light in the atmosphere. It seemed like the qi of weeping deceased people were in that sword. How many people had died by that sword? This time, Lin Feng wanted to get one of the best teachers possible. Therefore, he decided to use this sword. The qi became oppressive in the air. His bloodthirsty sword was emitting whistling sounds. The qi was becoming colder and colder. Lin Feng wasn't considering this exam as a real exam. Instead, he considered that battle as a battle to death. He wanted to kill his opponent. That was the only way for him to really take things seriously and deploy his full strength. It had to come from the depths of his heart and soul. The hunter frowned. He was realizing that he didn't look like a hunter in front of Lin Feng. Lin Feng looked like a real hunter. He was firmly holding his sword and seemed like he was hunting some prey. His face was filled with murder. The hunter already had a good impression of Lin Feng at that moment. Unlike the others, Lin Feng was using his heart. He wasn't taking this as an exam, instead he was facing an enemy. Those ice-cold pupils were making the hunter feel a bit uneasy though. A terrifying sword chi started spreading in the air and revolving at incredible speeds. The crowd looked anxious and were breathing heavily. Some terrifying sword intent started rising up in the air. Level 1-2. 5 sword intent. The crowd was stupefied. Lin Feng's sword intent was level 5. What a terrifying sword. A black fire then ignited on his sword. That fire was pitch black like death. Lin Feng's entire body turned into a sword. He was in fusion with his sword. His sword was Lin Feng was a sword. Die! Finally Lin Feng shouted. He released all of his sword chi and used his 9 days wind chi agility technique. He immediately disappeared from his initial position and his sword, which was red like blood, moved towards the middle-aged man with incredible speeds. The middle-aged man frowned. How fast? Lin Feng was using wind intent too. Snow! Shouted the middle-aged man furiously. Some rolling sound spread in the air. Snow condensed and blocked the way. However, that red sword continued moving as it pierced through the snow. The black fire melted the snow instantly. The sword hadn't been influenced at all. The middle-aged man jumped back. It was the first time during the tests. Lin Feng's sword was too fast. Stop! A terrifying pure chi appeared in the air. It was pure snow chi. It was extremely cold as a layer of ice appeared around the red sword. Lin Feng's sword was obliquely moving forwards. Fire kept burning. The snow melted again. Lin Feng inclined his body sideways and moved like the wind. The red light diffused by the sword was dazzling. Lin Feng wasn't sitting an exam, he was fighting for real. Fire intent, whispered the middle-aged man. He looked more and more surprised. The old man in the distance was smiling. He had already anticipated that move. The hunter was just there for a test. He understood geniuses. He had seen many geniuses in Tianqi and had taught many of them too. He was the most qualified to choose the most appropriate teachers for those geniuses. Even though he wasn't very strong, he looked ferocious. He had always protected Tianqi and worked for the empire. He had seen a myriad of geniuses and all those he had seen today satisfied him. Interesting. The middle-aged man raised his hand and released some snow intent. A terrifying snow chi moved towards the sword and Lin Feng. The bloodthirsty sword was covered by ice, as well as Lin Feng's hand. Go back. A heavy physical strength moved towards Lin Feng's bloodthirsty sword, and the middle-aged man smiled. Break. Lin Feng made the strength of the Haruka rotate in his body and the ice broke. Die! Shouted Lin Feng furiously. He looked extremely violent as his face was filled with murderous intentions. His bloodthirsty sword diffused dazzling red lights again. He really seemed like he wanted to kill the middle-aged man. Huh. The middle-aged man was stunned. He fused together with the snow and moved back. Lin Feng's sword was now descending from the sky. Rising wind. Lin Feng moved like an illusion and released some terrifying killer chi. The middle-aged man's eyes were twinkling with sharp lights. Ice and frost appeared from his hand and abruptly condensed. Then the sword crashed onto his hand. Let go off it, shouted the middle-aged furiously as some snow immediately froze Lin Feng's hand and sword. It seemed like Lin Feng was going to drop his sword. However, he didn't let go of his sword. His sword started rotating as he released some terrifying fire intent, which made a layer of snow and ice melt. Die! Shouted Lin Feng furiously. A terrifying red light emerged from the sword and arrived in front of the hunter's body. The hunter's pupils shrank as he backed away. He definitely wanted to dodge that attack. Go! The middle-aged man released his full strength, forcing Lin Feng's body violently backwards. The middle-aged man's hand danced with the snowflakes in the air. A black hair was in his hand. The middle-aged man looked at the black hair in his hand, raised his head, and looked back at Lin Feng, who was still holding his sword. Lin Feng was a sword cultivator. If Lin Feng was there, his sword was there. A magnificent smile appeared on his face when he faced that young man. Lin Feng was a real cultivator. He wanted to become a monstrously strong cultivator, a cultivation god. Chapter 752. Frozen. Very good. You are outstanding, said the hunter, smiling in a warm and friendly way. He didn't continue to battle against Lin Feng. He had seen enough. Lin Feng hadn't even thought of giving up in front of a cultivator of the Tianqi layer. Besides, the hunter had had to use his full strength to secure his win. Lin Feng had terrifying natural abilities, 3 different sorts of intent, and he was extremely determined. Lin Feng hadn't disappointed him, on the contrary, he had pleasantly surprised him. Tianqi Shui's eyes were twinkling. Lin Feng's strength had exceeded her expectations. He was incredibly strong. He could control 3 different sorts of intent even. No wonder he was so proud and arrogant. At least he was arrogant in her eyes. Some people were pulling a long face by Li Shi, for example. He had been the first one to sit the exam, and it seemed like he was quite weak when compared with the others. Han Qiuyu had been better than him. Huang Fulong had been too. Lin Feng had been way more incredible than him. Hunter, what do you think? Asked the old man, stepping forwards. He had appointed Shui Lijian as Bai Lishi's teacher, Xuanchun as Han Qiuyu's teacher, and now he had to find a teacher for Lin Feng. I'm bringing him to see someone, said the hunter to the old man. The old man narrowed his eyes, which were twinkling. He smiled and said, all right, please do. You can show them where to go. Just leave him to me. All right, said the old man while smiling, looking at the group of people. Everybody understood that they had to follow the old man. The old man was going to bring them to their teacher, extremely strong cultivators of the Tianqi layer. Everybody glanced at Lin Feng as he was leaving. They were curious to know where he was going to go. After they all left, Lin Feng and Tang Yuyu as well as Shui Linglong were still there. Come with me, said the hunter while nodding at Lin Feng. They went into the depths of the snowy mountains. Lin Feng and Tang Yuyu were following the hunter. Shui Linglong was on Lin Feng's shoulders. Together, they were traveling across the immensity of the snowy region. They passed by some pavilions and palaces, and then they arrived in a vast snowy desert. Snowflakes kept falling from the sky. It seems like the region was even colder than where they were before. Those snowflakes were as big as goose feathers. Tang Yuyu was feeling extremely cold. She couldn't help but shiver. What a monstrous ice chi! Any ordinary cultivator would have frozen. In front of them, not so far away, was a black dot that looked like a house. Lin Feng didn't ask anything. He took out a Chong Pao from his jade ring and put it on Tang Yuyu's body. At the same time, he released some pure qi which rolled in the air and rotated around Tang Yuyu's body to wipe the ice and snow off her. The small house was closer and closer. In front of the house was a small snow bridge. It was about 10 meters long. It was crossing a precipice so deep that you couldn't see the bottom. For cultivators, 10 meters was similar to the length of one step. That bridge didn't seem that long to them, however. Putting a bridge in front of that small house just seemed to be a way to embellish the landscape. As if that bridge had been leading to another world. How cold! Lin Feng tapped his body to wipe some ice off. It was even colder when they crossed the bridge. The atmosphere was still filled with ice and snowflakes. The ice energy falling on his body was piercingly cold. Tang Yuyu's face was red. She was breathing with difficulty. Lin Feng released even more sun qi and grabbed Tang Yuyu's hand. He was transmitting some hot energy into her body. Tang Yuyu was suddenly surrounded by sun qi, protecting her body from the cold. The one who looked the most indifferent was Shui Linglong on Lin Feng's shoulder. She was calmly lying there with her beautiful little eyes looking at the small house. She looked pensive. The hunter slowly walked forwards and arrived at the front of the door of the small house. He slightly opened it and bowed. Teacher. Teacher. Lin Feng was surprised. That person was the hunter's teacher. He had brought him to his own teacher. Bring that girl back across the bridge to another place. She can't stay here, it's too cold. She needs to recover and only then can she approach, said a voice coming from inside the house. The hunter slightly nodded and looked at Tang Yuyu. Tang Yuyu was being protected by Lin Feng, otherwise she couldn't survive. Besides, she was injured, it was even worse for her to stay there. I will bring you back, said Lin Feng to Tang Yuyu. Then he brought her back to the other side of the bridge as well as Shui Linglong. It really was way too cold next to the house. Even Lin Feng, who was extremely strong, had to use pure qi to wipe the ice off. After bringing Tang Yu to the other side, he went back to the small house and calmly waited outside at the entrance. The hunter was also standing there and remained silent. Both of them looked like they were listening to the sound of the ice. Phew phew, the wind was gently blowing. Lin Feng sensed a terrifying coldness on his body. Inside the house, a white illusion appeared. That silhouette looked like an illusion. That person's body was barely visible. It actually looked like an aura. A soul, thought Lin Feng, stupefied. It was a soul. How cold, thought Lin Feng. Suddenly he could sense a terrifying ice chi. Then he saw that silhouette and some subtle sounds spread in the air. Lin Feng was starting to freeze. The wind started blowing much more violently. A terrifying ice chi started rolling towards Lin Feng. It was the illusion. It grabbed Lin Feng's body. He could only sense the piercing coldness penetrate into his body. Boom! A terrifying pure qi emerged, however. That person's silhouette continued moving towards him. Crackling sounds were spreading in the air. Lin Feng was freezing. He was unable to do anything to stop it. That coldness made his face feel like it was being stabbed. And on top of that, the coldness was getting nearer and nearer. Sword! Shouted Lin Feng furiously. A terrifying sword intent emerged and broke the ice. Then the ice exploded into pieces. However, the ice wasn't broken enough, and another layer appeared around his body. Lin Feng was moving with more and more difficulty. Fire! A terrifying fire ignited. Sword and fire intent invaded the atmosphere. Useless, everything was useless. No matter what Lin Feng did, the terrifying ice energy kept getting nearer. Lin Feng was about to turn into an ice block. Only his face was outside. The rest of his body had turned into an ice statue. Freeze, said the illusion. Some crackling sound spread in the air, and slowly Lin Feng's face started freezing too. Lin Feng had turned into an ice statue. Lin Feng, said Tang Yu on the other side of the bridge. She immediately stood up and stared at Lin Feng, even though she was injured. What was going on? Why was Lin Feng frozen? She couldn't see the soul. She could only see that Lin Feng had suddenly turned into an ice statue. How cold! Lin Feng was still conscious. He wanted to release some strength and break the ice, but he was unable to move. He felt like he had no strength anymore. He had the feeling that his life was extremely fragile. A face with a smile appeared in front of him, as if that person had been making fun of him because he was too weak. The terrifying ice energy paralyzed Lin Feng. His blood started freezing. It even stopped flowing. He couldn't make the pure qi flow in his body anymore. His entire body and organs were about to freeze. If his blood and pure qi stopped flowing, his life would stop. Am I going to die? Thought Lin Feng, looking at that terrifying face in front of him. He had the feeling that he was an immensely fragile human being. He was so weak. He hadn't even been able to withstand a single attack. Chapter 753. Making the demon pure teacher, cried out the hunter in alarm. He was scared. What was his old teacher doing? The illusion ignored the hunter. He moved towards Lin Feng and continued freezing him. Lin Feng's blood and pure qi were freezing as well as his soul. How cold! How cold! Lin Feng's eyes were frozen too. They were closed at that moment. Maybe he was dying. No, I cannot die now, thought Lin Feng, trying to make his heart continue beating. He couldn't die. He had so many things to do. If he died, Shuiyu would be doomed. His parents would be in great danger. Meng Qing would be alone and abandoned. He had to kill some people. He had to get his revenge. Those who used to despise him and were a threat to his family and friends had to die. How could he die and leave them alone in that world? He still had to become a stronger cultivator. He was hoping to be able to control his destiny and protect his friends and family members. Lin Feng was trying to stay conscious. He was gnashing his teeth with the determination to live. However, Lin Feng was completely frozen at that moment. That coldness might make him fall asleep for the eternity. He was still alive, but perhaps he was going to freeze alive. He couldn't do anything anymore. Lin Feng opened his eyes again and looked at the face in front of him. Flames of fury were burning in Lin Feng's eyes. Those eyes looked like the eyes of a furious ghost. His blood was about to stop flowing as well as his pure qi. Lin Feng's ice-cold eyes gradually started looking desperate and hopeless. Am I dying? Thought Lin Feng. His voice, even in his head, sounded extremely weak. His eyes gradually closed themselves again. Some tears even appeared. He wasn't crying because he was afraid to die, but because he was afraid of what would happen after his death. While he gradually closed his eyes, he could see Meng Qing in his thoughts, such a pure and holy-looking woman. He could see her smile, which was more resplendent than the sun. He could also see his parents, or Duan Xian Yi, looking desperate. He could see Tang Yuyu, who seemed to be weeping. Finally, Lin Feng saw nothing anymore. His eyes were closed and he would never be able to open them again. Am I dead? That was Lin Feng's last thought. He was not resigned to die, and after that thought, his consciousness vanished. He died. After a very long time, which seemed like another century, Lin Feng suddenly regained conscious. It seemed like he had just remembered something and his eyes abruptly opened themselves. In front of him, snowflakes were still falling from the sky. It was extremely cold, but it was also extremely beautiful. I didn't die, whispered Lin Feng. The sound of a little moaning creature resonated in his ears. He then saw Meng Qing jump onto his chest and lie down. She just calmly lied down on his chest. Meng Qing, said Lin Feng with a resplendent smile on his face. Meng Qing was proof that he was still alive. He had regained consciousness. Lin Feng turned his head and saw Tang Yuyu sitting on the ground next to him. It seemed like her injuries had almost been healed. She was now able to resist to the cold. Besides, she didn't look burnt by the ice like before. You woke up, said Tang Yuyu with a sweet smile on her face. She moved and a mark appeared from where she had been sitting. Considering the depths of the mark, it seemed like Tang Yuyu had been sitting there for a very long time without moving. What's going on? I didn't die, said Lin Feng, looking surprised. On that day, he had had the impression that he had died, that he had frozen to death. You died once, said a voice at that moment. A silhouette slowly came out of the small house. In front of Lin Feng appeared the one who had killed him, but he didn't look like a murderer anymore. He looked calm and different. One couldn't even see how strong he was at that moment. Lin Feng was surprised when he saw him. That person had killed him. How is the feeling of death? Asked the old man while smiling. He was white from head to foot. Not pleasant at all, said Lin Feng, sounding a bit cold. That feeling could only be described that way. He had felt desperate and hopeless. The feeling couldn't be described with words. That's absolutely normal. Our world is cruel. Only those who have experienced death know how to enjoy life. On the path of cultivation, one has to go through hardships and experience the harshest difficulties of life. You never know, you might be the next one to die on the path of cultivation. Lin Feng, you have gone through death. Now that you have died once, don't you have the feeling that you understand things better? Asked the old man in the snowy white Chong Pao in a gentle voice. Lin Feng was a bit surprised and coldness somewhat disappeared from his face. Death wasn't something that people could imagine. They couldn't understand everything after dying once either. Life was the same, life and death. Those two words weren't as simple as they sounded. However, dying really was a way of reaching another world. After having died, Lin Feng had penetrated into a new dimension of life. At the moment of death, Lin Feng had many thoughts flowing in his head, and many persons. It seemed like he had understood many things, as if he had reached a higher level of maturity and wisdom. You have to open your heart. Breaking through to the 9 Xianqi layer is difficult, and then it is even harder to break through to the Tianqi layer. They asked me to help you get rid of the demon in your body. However, I can't do that. Everything depends on you. You can only rely on yourself. The evil force which has invaded your heart is there because you made it come, and the only one who can make it leave your body is yourself. If you have the demon in your heart but don't let it invade you, you are not evil. In such circumstances, why would you need to expel it? You don't need to ask yourself if you will have a clear consciousness or not, even if you have the demon in your heart, so what? Some people can annihilate millions of others at once if they are infuriated. They make the world turn into a river of blood, but they don't turn into demons. Actually, their heart is pure. This is because they stick to their initial intentions. They learn how to understand their own self. Then the demon can turn into a pure tool, said the old man in a snowy white Chong Pao slowly. Lin Feng's heart was shaking. What the old man was telling him was very similar to what Yan Yupingshan had told him in the past. It was just a bit deeper. If one had a clear consciousness, they could slaughter the common people without turning into a demon. And that demon could be transformed into a holy and wise tool. Lin Feng's cold qi seemed to have faded a lot. He stood up and bowed in front of the old man in the snowy white Chong Pao while saying, "Thank you, mister, for your explanations. Don't mention it. You died once and now you understand yourself much better now. You don't need me to teach you anything. I cannot be your teacher. Strong cultivators can give you skills and agility techniques, but extremely strong skills and agility techniques are limited. After breaking through to a specific cultivation level, the most important thing is to understand cultivation, to understand our world. In order to progress on the path of cultivation, you must study and understand. Therefore, I don't need to teach you anything else, you have to try and think about those things clearly first," said the old man in the Chong Pao. He then slowly turned around and moved back into the small house. Lin Feng looked pensive and then smiled. He hugged Xueling Long, threw her up in the air and caught her again. She bared her fangs and extended her claws. She was excited. Tang Yuyu was calmly watching Lin Feng teasing Xueling Long, and then smiled in a sweet way. Lin Feng looked like the Lin Feng she had always known. After a short moment, Lin Feng put Xueling Long back down onto the ground and looked at Tang Yuyu. Tang Yuyu lowered her head and slightly smiled. She shivered. She only sensed Lin Feng's hand on her face. It was such a sweet, pleasant and warm feeling. Tang Yuyu raised her head and saw Lin Feng. "I'm fine. You have to remember to take care of yourself," said Lin Feng in a gentle, warm voice. He was smiling with resplendence. Surprisingly, Tang Yuyu wanted to cry. She had sometimes followed people out of her hometown but had rarely thought of those excursions to be really worth it. This time it was really worth it. "Stop talking now, I think I am about to break through to the next cultivation layer," said Lin Feng. Immediately after, he pulled his hand away from Tang Yuyu's face, closed his eyes and penetrated into a state of meditation. Tang Yuyu was speechless. Lin Feng was about to break through to the 9th Xianqi layer. Many people who were in the mountain chain looked at the sky and realized they were in the Tianqi Empire and could surprisingly see the sun. What was that sorcery? "There is a Zun cultivator in Tianqi who practices sun skills," whispered someone. That person couldn't understand. However, the snowy mountains of Tianqi were so numerous, they didn't know all of the Zun cultivators of the empire. Even if that was very strange, nobody had ever said that the Tianqi Empire only accepted snow cultivators. Fire cultivators were welcomed. That skill had pierced through the immense pure whiteness of the atmosphere and was fusing together with the sun. It was actually absorbing the resplendence of the sun. It was probably an incredibly powerful sun skill. After being surprised, the crowd got back to their own things or continued practicing cultivation. Nobody knew that the one who was absorbing the resplendence of the sun was a young man sitting cross-legged in front of a small house with his eyes closed. The snowflakes in the air were going insane and moving chaotically in all directions. Then they penetrated into Lin Feng's body and disappeared. Around where Lin Feng was sitting, there was no more snow because he had swallowed it all. Tang Yuyu and Xueling Long were a bit far from Lin Feng because the qi he was releasing was too hot. It was even more powerful than the qi the snow in the air contained. Tang Yuyu and Xueling Long had the impression that they were burning on a stake next to Lin Feng. "I really wonder where he gets all those skills and techniques," thought Tang Yuyu while shaking her head. The snow melted and even the snow in the small house melted. A terrifying fire was burning all around Lin Feng's body. His qi was also gradually becoming stronger. "He's about to break through to the 9th Xianqi layer," thought Tang Yuyu astonished. He had died and his thoughts and power of understanding had changed. It seemed like he had understood some mysteries of life. He only needed to swallow some insane qi of the earth and sky. When a stream was formed, a river appeared. Boom boom. Immediately after, his terrifying fire rose up in the air, and it seemed like all the snowflakes in the air were going to disappear. That ray of sunlight was even more dazzling than before. Lin Feng's sun was dazzling to the eyes. It was painful to look at him practice cultivation. Some crackling sounds spread in the air. It was the world was starting to crackle. Lin Feng had understood something deep and profound. He opened his eyes and a terrifying fire emerged out of them. It seemed like his eyes were like two fireplaces, filled with a terrifying fire. That brazier was insane and seemed extremely violent. Lin Feng smiled. He had broken through to the 9th Xianqi layer. Just like the old Zun cultivator in the snowy white Chong Pao had said, after experiencing death, he had understood things about himself which he didn't know before. He knew what he really needed to do, and what he wanted to do in life. Lin Feng had broken through to the next Xianqi layer. Lin Feng stretched his hand and a round dazzling sun fire slowly burnt in his hand, emitting small and subtle sounds. The fire contained a terrifying burning potential. Besides, Lin Feng could sense that his skill was getting closer and closer to becoming a great sun skill. Now, cultivators of the 9th Xianqi layer would be terrified in front of his fire. Those whose cultivation level was inferior to that of the 9th Xianqi layer would burn like ants under a magnifying glass. The old man in the Chong Pao slowly came out of the small house and looked at Lin Feng, whose fire almost looked real. He slightly nodded. That fire was sun fire. He hadn't thought that Lin Feng's skills were that powerful. Besides, that sun skill contained some fire intent. Lin Feng's power of understanding was terrifying. After dying, he had improved his cultivation level. In such circumstances, Lin Feng would also easily break through to the Tianqi layer, provided that he didn't let the demon invade his heart again. With the demon, he would never break through to the Tianqi layer. Lin Feng, do you want to study some incredible fire skills? Asked the old man in the snowy white Chong Pao. Lin Feng was first surprised and then immediately nodded. Why not? If he had the occasion to improve his cultivation level, why not? He wanted to become stronger. Alright, I will bring you to someone else. Your two friends can stay here and practice cultivation, said the old man. Lin Feng looked at Tang Yu and Xue Linglong, who nodded back to him. Xue Linglong was adorable and obeyed Lin Feng. Thank you, mister, said Lin Feng, nodding to the old man. The old man was a Zun cultivation and had helped him break through to the next cultivation layer. Lin Feng was extremely grateful. Now, he was going to bring Lin Feng to see one of his friends. Zun cultivator's friends were also Zun cultivators. Let's go, said the Zun cultivator. In a flash, some snowflakes condensed and moved in the air. Lin Feng jumped in the air and landed on that snow rug, then followed the old man. This time, Lin Feng was realizing how huge the mountains of Tianqi were. There were huge snowy peaks everywhere. The two of them were moving at incredible speeds. After a short time, they stopped in the air above a small house. It looked very simple. Then a silhouette rose up in the air. Mr. Xue, I saw that someone was practicing some fire skill over there. I knew that you were going to come, said that person who was wearing a fire Chong Pao. He was surrounded by fire too. He looked at Lin Feng with his eyes filled with flames. Don't tell me that this little boy is able to attract the fire of the sun, said the old fire Zun cultivator while staring at Lin Feng. The latter had the impression that a scorching hot fire was about to ignite on his body. The old man in one glance could make people feel like they were going to burn. Lin Feng understood that the old man was precisely an extremely strong Zun cultivator, who was an expert at fire cultivation. Chapter 755. The annoying Zun cultivator. The Zun cultivator's fire was rotating around his body. Lin Feng was so young and had already broken through to the 9th Xianqi layer. Do you think that I was the one who used sun fire? Said the old man in snowy white Chong Pao while laughing. The fire cultivator looked at him and said, So it's you? What the hell are you talking about? Are you a moron or what? Said the old snow cultivator rudely, which astonished Lin Feng. Those cultivators were Zun cultivators. They were extraordinary. They didn't belong to the normal world anymore. However, they were two old men at the same age, but they were acting like little boys. Maybe in front of other people they showed one side of their personality, but that between them they were normal people. Actually, they were also people, just extremely strong ones. The fire cultivator didn't doubt about his friend's words. Instead, he looked at Lin Feng pleased. You practiced a sun skill, right? Indeed, said Lin Feng while nodding. It was almost impossible to hide anything from a Zun-level cultivators. Release your full fire intent, show me, said the old fire cultivator. The snow cultivator took a few steps backwards, leaving some space. Lin Feng nodded as a terrifying sound started spreading in the air. A monstrous fire invaded the atmosphere and moved around furiously. It was rotating and roaring. It seemed like it could burn everything. The snowflakes in the atmosphere were melting slowly. That fire was moving like waves in the fire cultivator's direction. The fire cultivator was surrounded by Lin Feng's flames, however. He was just standing there in the middle of that fire. He was calmly bathing in that fire. That fire was extremely far from being able to do anything to him. He was absolutely unaffected. The fire was even weakening next to him. 9th Xianqi layer. Cosmos Burning Sun skill. Level 3 fire intent. Even though you are talented, you are not strong at all, said the old fire cultivator while sensing that subtle qi. Immediately after, he shook his head. He wasn't satisfied. Why had Mr. Shui brought such a young man to him? A Tian-level cultivator could take care of him. That was definitely enough. He didn't care if Mr. Shui was his friend and had introduced him. It was all the same to him. He didn't feel like teaching a young man such as Lin Feng. What you mean is that you are not willing to become the teacher of the young cultivator I brought to you, said the snow cultivator mockingly. The fire cultivator was surprised by his interlocutor's tone of speech, puzzled. He didn't understand what it meant. You brought him here. You want me to teach him things. I am convinced that you taught him a few things too, though. His cultivation isn't mysterious at all. Initially, he had the strength of the 8th Xianqi layer. Now he has broken through to the 9th Xianqi layer. Could it be that you are the one who helped him break through to the 9th Xianqi layer? Asked the fire cultivator. There was a huge difference between the 8th and the 9th Xianqi layer. Besides, level 3 fire intent also meant something completely different between a cultivator of the 8th and 9th Xianqi layer. If Lin Feng had just broken through to the 9th Xianqi layer, it also meant that his intent would increase soon too. Maybe his fire intent would soon be level 4. That would be terrific. Stop talking shit. I am asking you if you want him as a student or not, said the snow cultivator, upsetting the fire cultivator. He remained silent and said, Mr. Shui, reply to my question. Lin Feng, it seems like he doesn't appreciate us, so we'll leave. I will introduce you my friend Jian Fengzi, said the snow cultivator while waving. He sounded proud. Immediately after, he rose up in the air and started leaving with Lin Feng. In the blink of an eye, they had already crossed a distance of 1 kilometer. Jian Fengzi, the fire cultivator, was stupefied. He jumped in the air towards them, chased them and said, Mr. Shui, tell me precisely what's going on. Why would you go and see Jian Fengzi? The fire cultivator had prevented them from moving forwards. Jian Fengzi was insane. He only liked swords and didn't like people. His sword was his sweetheart, his wife. Mr. Shui wanted to introduce Lin Feng to Jian Fengzi. Could it be that Lin Feng understood swords too? You are unfriendly. You can stay here alone. Let us pass, said the snow cultivator, sounding impatient. No, said the fire cultivator. If I don't accept him as a student, do you really think that Jian Fengzi will? So you're really curious to see what he can do, said the snow cultivator. Then he looked at Lin Feng, smiled and said, Lin Feng, open his eyes, make him regret his constant humiliations. You know that the region is huge. There isn't only one Zun cultivator here. I can find other friends for you. Lin Feng was stupefied. Those 2 Zun cultivators were arguing. Their tongues were sharp. In the past, he used to think that Zun cultivator were like deities. Now, he was seeing 2 Zun cultivators arguing and had the impression that they were normal people. However, he still worshipped them for their cultivation level. Lin Feng shook his head and smiled wryly. In a flash, his entire body turned into a sharp sword. Whistling sounds were spreading everywhere in the sky. Then he released some terrifying sword intent too. The fire cultivator was astonished. He even moved back. That sword intent was swift and fierce. Level 5 sword intent, said the fire cultivator, looking astonished. Level 5 sword intent. Besides, it was extremely ripe. It meant that Lin Feng had been using it for a long time already. He had probably learnt it when he was still of the 8th Xianqi layer. When he still had the strength of the 8th Xianqi layer, he could already use level 5 sword intent and level 3 fire intent. That was much stronger than being at the 9th Xianqi layer and only having level 3 determination. You guessed right, at the beginning when we met, he had only broken through to the 8th Xianqi layer. And then he broke through to the 9th Xianqi layer, said the snow cultivator. Immediately after, he looked at Lin Feng and said, continue to surprise him. Lin Feng understood what the old man meant. His sword intent disappeared, and in a flash a hurricane started sweeping away in the atmosphere. His body turned into an illusion and started dancing in the wind at incredible speeds, like an illusion. His entire body seemed to be in fusion with the wind. In a flash, Lin Feng made a gigantic loop and came back to his initial position. The wind disappeared, however. The fire cultivator was astonished. Level 2 wind intent. Lin Feng could understand 3 different sorts of intent. Lin Feng must have started practicing sword cultivation at the very beginning. Therefore, his strong point is sword cultivation. Then he must have started learning sun skills that he found coincidentally. Then, he must have started studying wind cultivation, said the snow cultivator indifferently. Then he jumped forwards and said, all right, old man, you don't like us, so we're going to see Jian Fengzi. He will probably be happy to see us. Now move away. Wait, said the fire cultivator hastily, not letting them leave. He then smiled and said, it's a misunderstanding, Mr. Shui, it's my fault. Who said I didn't like you? Let's go back together. No need, said the snow cultivator while shaking his head. You are unfriendly and rude. We will go and see Jian Fengzi, he will probably be more polite. He won't let us wait outside and then be rude and block our way. The sun cultivator wanted to insult the snow cultivator. That bastard. He was playing with him. Isn't it all due to a misunderstanding, though? Even though he wanted to insult the snow cultivator, the fire cultivator was smiling. He looked at Lin Feng and said, Lin Feng, am I wrong? Your sword intent is level 5. With your great cosmos burning sun, your fire intent could also reach level 5. I am a benevolent old man. I want to help you with that. No, Lin Feng, he was rude to you a moment before. If you accept his proposition now, you will lose face. Don't worry. Even without him, my other Zun level friends can help you, said the snow cultivator. Lin Feng, I have a Tian level skill here, it's called Spark Explosion. A single spark can start a gigantic fire and destroy everything. It would be perfect for you, said the fire cultivator, trying to tempt Lin Feng. A Tian level skill of lower quality. Whom do you think you are fooling? Said the snow cultivator in a disdainful way. Lin Feng slightly nodded. The way fire was ignited and burnt determined how strong it was going to be. It determined its explosive power. For example, Sun Qi had limits when attacking people. However, a black lotus contained terrifying strength and explosive power. Lin Feng, look over there, said the fire cultivator while pointing at a place in the distance. There was the facade of a mountain. Lin Feng looked over there and heard the Zun cultivator continue. Lin Feng, try and attack that facade. Remember, just use fire strength, don't use anything else. Lin Feng looked nervous, he had to use flames to destroy the facade of a mountain. Remember, burning fires can make things melt, said the old man. He then waved and said, go ahead. Lin Feng stood up and slowly walked towards the edge of the mountain. He looked at that mountain in the distance. He had the feeling of a huge stone weighing on his shoulders from the pressure. Use fire to make things melt. Burn, said Lin Feng in a low voice. His fire strength moved towards the facade of the mountain. However, only a small bit of snow melted, leaving him feeling exasperated. However, Lin Feng didn't give up. He was trying to understand what he was doing wrong. He was learning from his mistakes. The mountain was still huge as a few days had passed already. Lin Feng was sitting motionless, he was seemingly thinking about something. In the distance were 2 people sitting and playing chess. Those people were the snow and the fire cultivators, the 2 old Zun cultivators. Next to them was another old man. His facial expression looked sharp, just like a sword. That person was glancing at Lin Feng every now and then. Level 5 sword intent was very rare. Jian Fengzi, stop looking at him. It's disturbing him while he's studying, said the fire cultivator, glaring at Jian Fengzi. Studying? What could he study with a teacher like you? You're such a bad teacher, said Jian Fengzi coldly. The fire cultivator ignored the remark and said, He will definitely understand. Lin Feng stretched out his hand. A flame appeared, condensed. Then it slowly moved away from his hand. That flame looked normal, but when it crashed on the facade of the mountain, lots of snow melted. The explosive power of his fire had increased a lot. Burn, burn, whispered Lin Feng. It still wasn't enough. The source of fire intent was the way it ignited and burnt. Lin Feng had to understand how fire burnt before understanding fire intent. 6 days later, Lin Feng was sitting at the same place and bathing in a sea of fire. His fire had become so much more powerful compared to 6 days before. Lin Feng was sitting and studying, and while he was thinking, his burning fire intent was seemingly increasing. Fire intent depends on the way it burns. Understanding that is the only way to make fire stronger. I must control it in a better way. Lin Feng slowly stood up, and in a flash, a fire appeared and immediately surrounded the mountain. The mountain was covered in an ocean of flames. He looked at the fire cultivator and said, "Mister, when I didn't understand the source of fire intent, I could still use fire determination. There isn't only one sort of intent, right? Of course, I just wanted to tell you that the source of fire intent was the way it burnt. There are different ways to understand intent, which gives birth to different sorts of intent. In the past, you were able to use fire intent without understanding its source because you have incredible natural abilities. You are a real genius, you know how to use your brain," said the fire cultivator. Lin Feng nodded. He knew how talented he was. Everything had a cause. The source of sword intent was murderous intentions. The source of fire intent was the way it ignited and burnt. In the past, he could turn his sword into a killer sword because he understood killer intent. After that, he had observed the sun rise and set and then understood the morning sun intent, the radiant sun intent and the evening sun intent. All of those sorts of intent belonged to sword intent, and they all required a deep understanding. Understanding the source of things could help Lin Feng increase his strength. For example, he didn't need to add intent to his attacks. He only had to add fire to his attacks to make it stronger than it used to be. The sword cultivator glanced at Lin Feng. His eyes were sharp and twinkling. Lin Feng obviously noticed him. "Mister, is there anything I can do for you?" asked Lin Feng. "Come with me," said the sword cultivator while standing up. Lin Feng suddenly sensed a pain in his arm. The sword cultivator had grabbed his arm. "Feng Zi, you're a bit impudent," said the two other cultivators while obstructing his way. They were looking at Feng Zi with a smile, yet holding back a little. "What? You want to fight? Neither of you can compete with me," said the sword cultivator. His eyes twinkled as a terrifying sword light emerged out of his eyes. It seemed like the atmosphere was going to be lacerated. "One of us alone cannot defeat you, but together we can," said the snow cultivator, smiling. He could understand what Feng Zi meant. He had never underestimated the sword cultivator's qi. Jian Fengzi only likes swords. People who attacked him were insane. Indeed, Jian Fengzi, if you want to teach Lin Feng, there are 2 conditions. The first is to show me and Mr. Shui some respect by offering us a cup of tea. The second one is to offer him a sword skill which we both think is worthy. Finally, you must wait until I am done teaching him. Only then you can have him," said the fire cultivator to Jiang Fengzi. He had the opportunity to teach Lin Feng, so he wanted to benefit from it. Lin Feng was astonished. He had always dreamt of seeing Zoom cultivators. It was an incredible opportunity. However, he had never thought they would fight to teach him things, and on top of that would fight to give him some incredible skills. At the beginning, the snow cultivator had threatened the fire cultivator, and now they were both threatening the incredibly strong sword cultivator. Lin Feng was smiling wryly. He was really lucky. He had used his full strength to attack the hunter, and had been brought to the snow cultivator. Now, the snow cultivator had introduced him to his friend, and they were both introducing him to another friend of theirs. "No problem for the second condition. The first one I cannot fulfill," said the sword cultivator coldly. "Okay, come then," said the fire cultivator impolitely. The sword cultivator's eyes twinkled, and in a flash a terrifying sword energy rose up in the air like meteorites. "Condense!" shouted the snow cultivator, and the atmosphere froze. The ice immediately surrounded the sword cultivator's body, and the fire cultivator moved at the same time. Lin Feng was being dragged by the sword cultivator. Lin Feng was freezing after the snow cultivator spoke. His heart was pounding. They were all Zun cultivators with monstrous intent. With one thought, the earth and sky could freeze. Boom! The sword chi broke the ice chi as a terrifying fireball shot out towards the sword cultivator. The sword cultivator moved back, but the fireball had already reached Lin Feng's body. Jian Fengzi, you want to escape from us? You must really despise us, said the fire cultivator with a smile on his face. Lin Feng was speechless. They were all crazy. The sword cultivator looked at them coldly, remained silent for a few seconds, then he said, "All right, I accept. That's the spirit. Deal," said the fire cultivator. Both he and the snow cultivator were smiling. Immediately after, they moved back down to the snow. The sword cultivator then prepared some tea. The sword cultivator remained silent. For Lin Feng, he had surprisingly accepted to make some tea for the other two. They were both smiling, looking satisfied. They had regained face. The hunter was on a mountain in the distance and could see everything. He couldn't help but smile wryly when he saw his teacher and two uncles act that way. "It seems like I chose the right teachers for him. They all like him," whispered the hunter. Immediately after, he left, hoping that Lin Feng would continue to be lucky. Chapter 758. Sword Tempo. The sun was moving in the sky as time elapsed. Then the moon appeared. In the mountains of Tianqi, on a huge snowy area, a silhouette was practicing sword cultivation. His sword was dancing around in the air as snow was splashing around. Not far from that silhouette was Shueli Jian. He was observing Bai Li Shi using his sword and snow energies. Shueli Jian thought he was very talented. In 1 month, Bai Li Shi's intent had increased, both his sword and snow intents. At that moment, Bai Li Shi had broken through to the 9th Xianqi layer. His sword intent was level 3 and his snow intent was level 4. To a cultivator of the Xianqi layer, that was already incredible. He might even catch up with Tianqi Shui, the pure and holy woman. Zirr. Durr. Some subtle sound spread in the air. Snowflakes were being lacerated by the sword. Bai Li Shi's sword had to kill. It contained some deadly energy. Deadly energy? Shueli Jian frowned and said to Bai Li Shi, "Bai Li, is there hatred in your heart?" Bai Li Shi had released some deadly energy. It wasn't only sword deadly energy, it was murderous deadly energy. He wanted to kill people. His sword light disappeared and he put his sword away. Bai Li Shi smiled at Shueli Jian and said, "Teacher, I am all right." Shueli Jian looked at Bai Li Shi for a moment and then nodded. He didn't continue begging the questions. Since Bai Li Shi didn't want to tell him, he was not going to be involved. "Bai Li, in just a month with your strength and natural abilities, considering the progress you've made, you must be one of the 3 best. If you pay attention and are lucky enough, you will maybe be very lucky in the mysterious world and obtain some incredible treasures. You have to keep the situation under control though, never forget that. You have to remember that your life is the most important thing no matter what. Treasures are not important. You can abandon them if your life is at stake," said Shueli Jian to Bai Li Shi, who immediately nodded and said, "I understand, teacher." In Bai Li Shi's brain was a silhouette. It was Lin Feng. His obvious murderous intentions were because of Lin Feng. Actually, nothing had happened between him and Lin Feng. They hadn't even known each other for a long time. But Lin Feng wasn't like him or Han Qiuyu. He wasn't famous before the big test. He had suddenly appeared in Tianqi and had drawn everybody's attention. Besides, Lin Feng was much stronger than him, to the extent that Bai Li Shi was just like a tiny little insect. Bai Li Shi's prestige and fame had been hurt. Nobody cared about him anymore. Nobody was closely paying attention to him anymore. Lin Feng had become an imaginary enemy for him. But it could be that Lin Feng didn't even remember him. I wonder what he's been learning so far. Since his sword intent was already level 5, he mustn't have made lots of progress. Thought Bai Li Shi, trying to guess what Lin Feng's cultivation was like. At that moment, Lin Feng was in a valley full of snow. His sword was emitting whistling sounds in the air, and a terrifying sharp and deadly energy seemed like it could destroy everything. Lin Feng's eyes were closed though. He was standing, but he was motionless. The entire atmosphere was filled with a terrifying sword qi. especially above Lin Feng's head in the air. It seemed like there were millions of swords in the air, and they were emitting strident whistling sounds. Suddenly Lin Feng abruptly moved. Both his hands reacted as all the swords moved to another direction where he was pointing. Alone, he was controlling millions of swords and they were all performing the same actions. That was a perfect move. The sword formation was perfect. Lin Feng could control millions of swords at the same time, but any other strong sword cultivator could do that. However, Lin Feng's goal was to make those swords fuse together and become one. That was extremely difficult. Those swords seemed like they had become Lin Feng's hands. 10,000 swords unity, said Lin Feng. There were 3 people in that valley and they were standing there watching Lin Feng. That was the first try. Could he succeed with just one try? Millions of swords in one breath. It seems like those endless swords were all breathing at the same time. Lin Feng only needed a few days to succeed. How incredible, said the snow cultivator while smiling. He felt very lucky to know Lin Feng. He is even stronger than Jian Fengzi when he was young. Jian Fengzi couldn't manage to make those swords breath at the same time when he was at the Xianqi lair, said the fire cultivator, smiling and glancing at Jian Fengzi who remained indifferent. They wanted to first teach Lin Feng a Tian level skill of lower quality called sword tempo. Lin Feng was understanding and studying swords. That skill contained some terrifying sword intent. Boom! A muffled sound spread in the air and then Lin Feng started running. In a flash, the snow around him was lacerated by some sword qi. Mud appeared. Lin Feng raised his hands once again, slowly towards the front, and then millions of swords rose up to follow his movements. Together kill, shouted Lin Feng all of a sudden. A terrifying sword light appeared out of his mouth, and the millions of swords emitted incredible whistling sounds which moved in the same direction altogether. Those countless number of swords suddenly turned into one. Boom boom boom. A terrifying sound spread in the air as the ground started shaking violently. That sword had penetrated into a mountain and pierced right through it. There was a tunnel in the middle of the mountain now. One sword had sufficed to open a mountain. Phew. Tian level skills are very difficult. In more than 10 days, I have only learnt the first part of the skill, said Lin Feng, breathing in deeply. He felt like a hero in his heart. He hoped that he would be able to become a monstrously strong cultivator someday. According to the rumors, extremely strong cultivators could destroy mountains and make rivers go dry. Now he could already pierce through an entire mountain and see the other side. If other people had known his thoughts, they would have spat out blood. In 10 days, Lin Feng had managed to learn the first part of a Tian level skill, and was complaining that it took too long. Besides, what he was learning was a Tian level skill of medium quality. Many cultivators of the Xianqi layer would have needed months or years to learn the first part of the skill. Teachers, said Lin Feng while looking at the 3 old men and smiling. Lin Feng, did you study sword intent too? Asked Jian Fengzi. A little bit, but I need to confine myself for a few days in order to improve my sword intent. Then I will be able to reach the level 6, said Lin Feng after remaining silent for a second. Don't worry, when I had the strength of the 9th Xianqi layer, my sword intent was only level 2. Many cultivators barely understand sword intent when they break through to the Tianqi layer. It gets more and more difficult, even beyond studying and practicing day and night. Don't worry, there will be one day when your sword will reach the clouds. The sword cultivator was worried about Lin Feng. He didn't want Lin Feng to push himself too hard. Actually, Lin Feng's intent was already terrifying. He had relied on only himself to reach a level 5 sword intent. After some time he would break through to the Tianqi layer. That would be terrifying. His intent would definitely reach the level 6 then. How scary. Lin Feng nodded, didn't insist and didn't say anything more. He knew that he could increase his sword intent level. He only needed some time alone to visualize a sword. However, Lin Feng also understood that it was going to get harder and harder to become stronger. Higher intent levels and higher cultivation layers would be harder to reach. A month was too short. We don't have time to teach you anything. But with your current strength, you can go to the mysterious world without worrying. Please be very careful there though. When you come back from the mysterious world, we will teach you more things and we will help you break through to the Tianqi layer, said the old snow cultivator. 1 month had passed too fast. Lin Feng had only learnt the sword tempo skill and used half of his time doing so. They didn't have any time to teach him anything more. Lin Feng wasn't a human being anymore, he was a sword. He was calmly standing there while releasing some terrifying sword chi. A few days passed as the snow and fire cultivators were playing chess. Jian Fengzi was aside and his eyes were closed, as if the other's chess game had nothing to do with him. Mr. Shui, is it time to go to the mysterious world? It would be good for Lin Feng to improve his cultivation level even more. Ooh. At that moment some whistling sounds spread in the air, just like those of a sword. Those who were playing chess were surprised as they looked down at the valley. There was a very strong sword chi rising up in the air. The sword cultivator opened his eyes and slowly stood up before gazing into the distance. Brother, after all those years I have never seen Jian Fengzi care about anything, said the fire cultivator looking pensive. He then continued playing chess. If I were incompetent, Fengzi wouldn't be so obsessed by strength, said the snow cultivator while shaking his head. He looked a bit saddened. The sword cultivator was the youngest of them. He had joined their group after a while. Even though he was the youngest one, he was also the strongest because he had a very strong willpower, intent, and incredible natural abilities. Brother, no need to feel guilty. We all understand that you are acting in the interest of Tianxian. You are not weaker than Fengzi. Back when our teacher was there, Tianxian was the strongest of the 7 peaks. After he left to travel in the continent, no news came back, so Tianxian started fading a little. However, now we have been able to attract some geniuses and we even came across Lin Feng. It was the first time you came and introduced him to me. I didn't care because I thought he wasn't the one we were looking for. But now, said the fire cultivator. He then continued, but now Lin Feng could become a deep vein in Tianxian. He could become important here. Fengzi probably thinks the same way as me. Back then, his best disciple became a part of Tianxian and he is extremely happy. No, said the snow cultivator. The fire cultivator was surprised and asked, you don't agree with me? The snow cultivator was staring at the fire cultivator and replied, I hope that Lin Feng can become a high-ranking official in the Empire of Tianqi. I hope that he can become the only spokesperson of the snowy mountain of Tianqi. The fire cultivator shivered when he heard him. He wanted Lin Feng to become a spokesperson. If Lin Feng became a spokesperson, that would be incredible. But it was easier said than done. The sword cultivator didn't listen to their discussion. He just watched Lin Feng in the valley. At that moment Lin Feng was surrounded by a terrifying sword chi and intent. He was borrowing some strength from the earth too. Some more fire, said the sword cultivator. Then Lin Feng started shaking. He had the impression that he was going to suffocate in his world with so many swords. Destroy everything, nothing can block you. Swords are holy. They can slaughter everything, said the sword cultivator. Words which resonated in Lin Feng's heart. Swords could annihilate everything. At that moment, Lin Feng had nothing in his way to prevent him from becoming stronger. He could lacerate the sky. Break! The sword cultivator shouted extremely loudly, resonating in Lin Feng's brain. Break, break, break. That word was resonating in Lin Feng's brain and heart like a drumbeat. A terrifying sword energy dashed to the skies, and his sword intent level seemed like it was going to explode. Sword intent level 6. The Zun cultivator was blankly staring at Lin Feng. The 2 other silhouettes flickered and they arrived next to Fengzi. They were all staring at Lin Feng. His sword intent level increased. The 2 Zun cultivators were stupefied. Lin Feng had just practiced a few days, had wanted to practice alone because he was filled with self-confidence. And now he had managed to do it. His sword intent was now level 6. He had made progress. His strength was terrifying. With that, Lin Feng will surprise many people in the mysterious world, thought the 3 Zun cultivators. They were getting even more impatient to see Lin Feng in the mysterious world. They were all impatient to see how Lin Feng would be in the future. Chapter 760. Shut up. Lin Feng opened his eyes. He had a radiant smile on his face. His sword intent was now level 6. As expected, he was much stronger. He stood up and looked at Jian Fengzi. Then he bowed and said, "Thank you, teacher." He knew that a moment before, Jian Fengzi had helped him become stronger. Jian Fengzi's voice had resonated in his heart and brain. It had mixed with his sword chi, and had helped him break the limits of the 5th level. The strength of a Zun cultivator was incredible. He didn't need to move but could still help him. The Zun cultivator's intent level was incredible. Lin Feng couldn't imagine how high their intent levels were. Zun cultivators were the best cultivators in an empire of middle quality. Anywhere in such an empire, they were respected by others and even worshipped. Zun cultivators could annihilate an empire of middle quality using only one hand. In a tiny little country such as Shuiyu, it was extremely rare to see Zun cultivators. If there was one crossing the country, nobody even knew about it. No need to thank me. If you were not smart, I wouldn't have been able to help you. Besides, helping you doesn't cost me anything, so no need to mention it, said the sword cultivator smiling. Lin Feng hadn't even broken through to the Tianqi layer, but his sword intent was already level 6. Lin Feng would be terrifying after breaking through to the Tianqi layer. The higher a cultivator's cultivation level was, the more difficult it was to find opponents. The difference between the different cultivation layers was ever increasing. Besides, understanding intent was increasingly more important as their cultivation level increased. They could injure or even kill people easily by better understanding intent. Lin Feng, it's good that your sword intent is now level 6. It is time to go to the mysterious world. I have to remind you that the mysterious world isn't a normal place. Maybe that place is the palace of the emperors. Maybe it is the tomb of the emperors. In order to become an emperor, one must have reached cultivation emperor level. Nobody is stronger than a cultivation emperor. A cultivation emperor has Zun cultivators as subordinates. One shout and they can make the earth and sky change. Tian cultivators are their slaves. Now, even though there are some great treasures there, you cannot neglect the dangers and perils. You have to be extremely careful there. Even if there are incredible treasures, don't risk your life for them. Your life is the most important thing, said the snow cultivator in a solemn way. He was really worried about Lin Feng. Even a Zun cultivator in front of a cultivation emperor, also known as a Huang cultivator, was insignificant. According to the rumors, in the world there was one Huang cultivator known, and it was said that he had died already. But for him that was only a small limitation, only a restriction. With them were also their teachers. The teachers were impatient to see what kind of geniuses their mountain, the Tianxian mountain, had chosen. They also wanted to say goodbye to their students. After having spent 1 month with those geniuses, they could be considered their teachers. Bai Li Shi's teacher, Shueli Jian, looked at Chun Yang and was surprised. It seemed like that Han Qiuyu was much stronger than Bai Li Shi. Otherwise, the hunter wouldn't have chosen Chun Yang as a teacher for him. The Tian cultivators behind Bai Luo and Huang Quan also looked at Chun Yang. Han Qiuyu also noticed that his teacher was the stronger one. Amongst those 4 people, Bai Li Shi is the second strongest. If we count Tianqi Shui, he's the third. I wonder how strong the 3 others are. It seems like this time the selected geniuses are quite strong, thought Shueli Jian. Some sound spread in the air. Tianqi Shui was flying through the sky wearing snowy white clothes, and she looked extremely beautiful. However, she looked upset. Little Shui, why are you not waiting for me? Asked Huang Fulong, sounding simple-minded and silly. He was running after her. Tianqi Shui was gnashing her teeth. They had been practicing cultivation together for a month now, and she had suffered from all sorts of torments because of him. He had only been shameless. He said every day that she would be his future wife. On top of that, he had called her honey or darling many times. Tianqi Shui felt like she was going to explode. Everybody was surprised. Was that simple-minded young man was one of the 8 geniuses? Stay away from me. At least 100 meters away, said Tianqi Shui when she saw that Huang Fulong was getting nearer. Huang Fulong smiled in a silly way and said, "All right, anyways, everything will be all right as soon as your heart and my heart are connected." Tianqi Shui almost fainted when she heard that. This guy was really shameless. Little Shui, who's that? Asked Chun Yang, smiling. Apparently he knew Tianqi Shui. I don't know him, said Tianqi Shui in an indifferent way. Mister, my name is Huang Fulong, but you can call me Hai Chong. I am Little Shui's future husband, said Huang Fulong, giggling. Chun Yang frowned and then smiled. That guy was funny, but he must have been quite smart too, because he had managed to get the same teacher as Tianqi Shui. In the distance there were 3 silhouettes flying on a snow rug through the air. Amongst them was a young man and a small animal. The Tian-level teachers were astonished when they saw them. Then they immediately looked at Lin Feng and Tang Yu in a deep and meaningful way. Shui Lijian smiled wryly. The hunter had given him Bai Li Shi. He was only stronger than the twins Bai Luo and Huang Quan. The others were all stronger than Bai Li Shi, and the two people who were arriving at that moment had even received Zun-level teachers. A sword cultivator. Why would he be with a snow cultivator? Said Bai Li Shi mockingly when he saw Lin Feng. "Edge it up," said Shui Lijian while glaring at Bai Li Shi furiously. Bai Li Shi was astonished. Then he saw the Tian-level teachers move away and bow respectfully in front of the snow cultivator who was arriving. Then they said in unison, "Mr. Shui, dear and venerable Zun cultivator." Chapter 761. The Battle in the Snow Palace. Zun Cultivator. Bai Li Shi was about to collapse. He had the feeling that his entire body was freezing. He couldn't move. A Zun cultivator was with Lin Feng. A real Zun cultivator. His teacher and the other teachers even bowed respectfully in front of him. They worshipped the Zun cultivator. And the worst thing was that a moment before, he had been making fun of Lin Feng because a snow cultivator was teaching him, even though he was a sword cultivator. However, he could only admire that Zun cultivator. He was also afraid of him. And he was terribly jealous of Lin Feng. Why had Lin Feng obtained a Zun-level teacher? His teacher had only broken through to the third Tianqi layer. Was he really that far from Lin Feng? "Hello," said the snow cultivator, nodding and glancing at the crowd. He even glanced at Bai Li Shi but didn't pay much attention to him. Bai Li Shi had the impression that he was going to freeze. How cold, very cold. The snow cultivator only glanced at him for a second as if Bai Li Shi didn't even exist. Maybe the ice-cold expression in the Zun cultivator's eyes was due to the fact that he was a snow cultivator. Apart from Bai Li Shi, who was jealous, the others were also astonished. Tianqi Shui's heart was pounding. The dear and respectable Zun cultivator Mr. Shui, surprisingly, had been chosen to be Lin Feng's teacher. How incredible! Such incredible opportunities were usually only for her Tianqi Shui in the district of the Tianxian Mountain, but now Lin Feng also had such an opportunity. She was astonished, and one could see it from her beautiful eyes. She could still remember how Lin Feng had remained cold and indifferent, even proud in front of her. She felt uneasy. She had never seen a man feel so indifferent and even cold in front of her. It seemed like Lin Feng had never cared about her. "Teacher," said the hunter while walking towards to the snow cultivator and bowing. "Is everybody here?" asked the snow cultivator to the hunter. The hunter nodded and said, "Indeed, teacher, they are all here." "All right." The snow cultivator was glancing at the crowd again. Then he said, "Everybody, maybe you are not familiar with the snowy mountains of Tianqi. Let me explain some things to you very briefly. The snowy mountains of Tianqi are divided into 7 big snowy mountains. The snowy mountains of Tianqi have some rules. When you are in the outside world, you are like 1. You represent the snowy mountains of Tianqi. Tianqi was divided into 7 snowy peaks. It seems like they only knew a small part of the truth. An empire of middle quality was incredible and mysterious. It was impossible for common people to understand how strong it really was. I am telling you this because you have to understand that apart from you 8, the other snowy mountains will also send 8 geniuses, and they will go to the mysterious world with you. There might be some tensions between you guys, but I am warning you. You are not allowed to fight against each other. Do you understand?" "Understood. I understand." Everybody nodded one after the other. It seemed like what they thought before was completely wrong. They had thought that only 8 of them would go to the mysterious world. They had thought that they were the only 8 geniuses of the empire. However, there were actually 48 other people who were going to go with them. In total, there were going to be 56 people. And they were all going to represent the Tianqi Empire. What a terrifying number of people to represent an empire. But there were going to be so many treasures in the mysterious world that sending so many people was probably worth it. "Bring them to the snow palace," said the snow cultivator to the hunter. He nodded and told the geniuses, "Follow me." Then they all started running in the snowy immensity. The 8 silhouettes were flying in the air together. closely following the hunter. Apart from Tianqi Shui, nobody knew what the snow palace was. They traveled in the sky for an hour and then arrived in front of a gigantic snow palace. Everybody was shivering. Tianqi seemed to be really gigantic. Besides, they had just understood how incredible those 7 snowy Tianqi mountains were. On the way they had seen a few gigantic mountains, and at some point they had seen a mountain which was really high, much higher than the others. It looked majestic and domineering. "That is the 7th mountain, the Tianji mountain," said the hunter to the crowd. He then jumped forwards and landed on that mountain. At the very top of the mountain was the snow palace. The 8 geniuses were climbing the mountain. They had climbed half of the mountain so far. There were many snow palaces. The Tianxian snowy mountain looked small and miserable compared to the Tianji snowy mountain. Many people sighed with exasperation. Tianji really deserved to be called the king of the Tianqi mountains. The Tianji mountain peak was a huge and vast piece of snowy land without any footprint. In the distance was a gigantic palace which looked majestic, grandiose, magnificent. It made people want to prostrate themselves before it with respect and pay homage to its creators. The hunter slowly brought the geniuses to the top of the mountain. Lin Feng raised his head and looked at the snowflakes floating in the air. He had the impression that if he raised his hand, he would be able to touch the sky. Practicing cultivation in such a place would give any cultivator the feeling of practicing in outer space, giving birth to heroic feelings in their heart. They realized that several people had arrived already. They also realized that those people were divided into groups. Those were probably groups formed by the 6 other snowy mountains where they came from. They were all wearing different sorts of clothes depending on the mountain where they were from. There were stars on their clothes too, which enabled others to know which mountain they were from. The crowd turned to greet Tianxian as they arrived. They were a bit surprised at first and then they looked at them in a mocking way. People from Tianxian really are the weakest. Their reputation is definitely honest. They don't deserve to be with us. What will the other empires think of us if we accept such people? Said someone mockingly. The 8 geniuses of Tianxian were upset. They couldn't believe that someone would humiliate them immediately after arriving. "Shut up," said Tianqi Shui loudly. Many people considered Tianqi Shui as a goddess, but she was considered as a goddess only in the region of Tianxian snowy mountain. Even the seniors of Tianxian considered her as the best young cultivator, but outside of her region she was a nobody. People just assumed that she was simply representing Tianxian, nothing special. Tianqi Shui is prestigious in Tianxian, however. Was what I just said wrong? Don't forget that cultivators from Tianxian are the weakest. That's why you get bullied by the others. Maybe Tianxian hasn't taught you enough, said the same person mockingly. Many people started laughing when they heard him. They all despised Tianxian. In the past, Tianxian was respected and admired. But then some incredible ancestors disappeared from Tianxian, and it started falling in popularity. Until it became the weakest group of Tianqi, then it became the subject of various jokes and the 6 other groups were constantly making fun of them. "Your mouth is filthy," said Tianqi Shui jumping forwards. In a flash, a terrifyingly cold ice chi spread in the air and rolled towards that person. It contained some ice and snow intent which started freezing that individual. "Tianqi Shui. This is the snow palace," said someone moving in front of the one who had just made fun of them. That person released a terrifying chi which moved straight towards Tianqi Shui's ice chi and stopped it. "Move," said Tianqi Shui while attacking the one in front of her. She was furious. Immediately after she used an ice punch attack. Battles were also a way of comparing the strength of the various snowy mountains. "Get lost," said that person while jumping with strength. Snowflakes started flying in a flurry, and that person used another ice punch. Rumbling sounds were spreading in the air. Tianqi Shui was sent flying. Her face looked even colder. "Hee, can you see now, Tianqi Shui? The leader of Tianshu, Ling Shui, is very strong. You could be married with him. You wouldn't be able to find anyone better in Tianxian anyway," said someone behind them. Chapter 762. Finger threat. Tianqi Shui looked even colder. The people from Tianshu were really going too far. Yes, Tianqi Shui, Ling Xia is the strongest young man of Tianshu. But we're not like Tianxian where, apart from you, nobody dares attack. You should get married with Ling Xia and join Tianshu. continued the same person. They only were saying this after seeing how weak the people from Tianshu were. Asshole, swore someone, astonishing the entire crowd. Then they saw someone behind Tianqi Shui. Huang Fulong was the one who had just cursed. Huang Fulong made huge steps forwards. Flames of fury were burning in his eyes. He was staring at the people from Tianshu and said, Tianqi Shui is my wife. Tianqi Shui was surprised and glared at him. That bastard. Da Haichong, you are the weakest of us 8. Ling Xie is the leader of Tianshu. Go and have a try with him, said Tianqi Shui. Even though she wanted to insult him, she knew that he was extremely strong. He had a monumental physical strength and his dragon fist was terrifying. All right, said Huang Fulong. He immediately ran forwards at Ling Xie, making him feel uncomfortable. Huang Fulong looked like a terrifying dragon at that moment. I will crush anyone that dares humiliate my wife, shouted Huang Fulong extremely loudly. He then continued running forwards with some terrifying force in his hands, oppressing Ling Xie's body. Whistling sounds spread in the air and the chant of the dragon started resonating. The crowd was stupefied. Huang Fulong looked like a dragon suddenly. Huh. Ling Xie frowned and his long hair started fluttering violently with his clothes. Huang Fulong's force was impressive. Ling Xie frowned and moved back, but then he stopped. How could he retreat in front of so many people? As the leader of Tianshu, could he move back? Piss off! Shouted Ling Xie furiously, and a fist launched out at Huang Fulong roarer. A terrifying dragon roar emerged out of Huang Fulong's body. That sound came from Huang Fulong's terrifying force. It was brutal and violent, it seemed like it could crush anything. Boom boom boom. The two fists collided and the crowd sensed a terrifying hurricane brush away on their skin. Some crackling sounds spread in the air as the crowd saw the leader of Tianshu slide backwards in the snow. Arf ha! Then the crowd heard a terrifying and furious shout which resonated in their heads. The crowd was looking at Huang Fulong, who was surprising everyone. That guy had a terrifying strength, his blood and muscles seemed really strong. So that is the leader of Tianshu. Nobody can defeat us, Tianxian. You cannot even defeat the weakest genius of Tianxian. You're quite shameless, said Tianqi Shui coldly, upsetting the geniuses of Tianshu. However, Huang Fulong had attacked a bit hastily. Ling Xie didn't have enough time to react properly. Although unfair, he had still managed to make him move back, leaving everyone speechless. Huang Fulong was smiling like an idiot. He scratched his head and said, indeed, the leader of Tianshu is nothing special at all. Ling Xie coughed up some blood when he heard Huang Fulong. Indeed, Huang Fulong's violent and brutal attack had injured him. He had been too careless. There would have been no problems if he had chosen to move back, but he was the leader of Tianshu. He would have lost face if he had retreated. All he could do was suffer in silence now. Is that so? Since he is the weakest of Tianxian, I want to see and test someone else's strength, said the first one who had joked about Tianqi Shui. His face looked hideous. Huang Fulong's strength was terrifying. He was probably the strongest one. The one who had joked didn't believe that they were honest about Huang Fulong. He glanced at the crowd from Tianxian and eventually noticed Lin Feng. Lin Feng had broken through to the 9th Xian Qi layer, but he looked a bit weak. Besides, his qi wasn't that impressive. He had probably just broke through to the 9th Xian Qi layer. Fighting against people who had just broken through to the next cultivation layer was easy because their cultivation wasn't stable yet. You want to fight against Lin Feng? Mocked Huang Fulong. He shouldn't have talked, but he couldn't keep his mouth shut because the other one was staring at Lin Feng. Besides, he was smiling mockingly. Lin Feng was almost as strong as him, choosing him would make no difference. Tianqi Shui was speechless. She was happy about that guy's choice. Get ready. I will attack you. We people of Tianshu are not like you. If we want to fight, we challenge people without surprise attacks, said that person mockingly. He was referring to the fact that Huang Fulong had attacked a bit too suddenly. I am also the weakest person of Tianshu. Let's see how strong people of Tianxian are, said that person. He jumped forwards and rumbling sounds spread in the air. There was a terrifying physical strength emerging from his fist, as well as some ice intent which was blowing on Lin Feng's body. Lin Feng looked at the opponent coldly, slowly raised his hand, actually just one finger. A terrifying sword energy was in that finger, but because of the pressure, his sharp chi was being constricted. "Get lost!" shouted the opponent loudly. A terrifying physical strength made the ground shake. Lin Feng raised his finger and a terrifying sword intent emerged from it. People could sense it all over their bodies. Zero. Lin Feng moved his finger towards the enemy's fist, and they crashed into each other. Ah! The opponent emitted a blood-curdling shriek. He immediately withdrew his fist and moved back to his initial position. He couldn't stand the pressure. He was blowing on his fist to try and alleviate the pain. Cold sweat was flowing on his forehead. Drip, drip. 2 threads of blood were dripping on the white snow. It was an incredible scene. People raised their heads and looked at Lin Feng. That young man who had remained silent was extremely impressive. He had used a single finger to crush his opponent's fist, and even injured him. "You really are weak," said Lin Feng, making the other person extremely angry. His cheeks were burning with humiliation. People from Tianshu were all depressed. Their leader had been projected backwards. Then another one had been defeated and injured by one finger. The Tianshu group had lost a great deal of face. It seems like the Tianxian group contained some pretty good cultivator, thought some people from the other snowy mountains. They didn't look at them mockingly anymore. Being strong was the only way to be respected. In the world of cultivation, strength was the most important thing. "Interesting, it seems like the Tianxian group is quite good," said someone wearing purple clothes while moving forwards. People who belong to the Tianji group wore purple clothes. "I wonder how many of those people will come back alive," said the person sounding arrogant and proud. Tianqi Shui glanced at that person but she said nothing. The one who was talking was the leader of the Tianji group, Yu Tianji. He knew some secrets of the universe. Yu Tianji held the greatest potential in the Tianji group. He would be able to climb the hierarchy in the future and would be respected by everybody. Chapter 763. For the Empire. Lin Feng looked at that young man in purple. Those who were from the Tianji group were at the very front and seemed very arrogant. Yu Tianji looked particularly arrogant and proud, more than the others. It seemed that the cultivators of the Tianji group respected him a lot. He was also a sort of leader in their group, just like Ling Xie and Tianshu. Besides, he seemed to be even more respected than Ling Xie. Tianji. Some people were glaring at the people from Tianji, but others were looking at them respectfully and maybe enviously. They wished they could be part of the Tianji group. They wished they could be arrogant and proud, rather than being a member of Tianxian and being humiliated by others. Bai Li, she was one of those thinking that way. Those from the Tianxian group are not bad this time, but Tianxian is still too weak. If you are not resigned to give up, we will get very angry and crush you, said Yu Tianji indifferently. He sounded way too pompous. Maybe he would climb up in the hierarchy in Tianqi later, so he was practicing acting like a great leader. But Yu Tianji's tone of speech annoyed Lin Feng. Most people were looking at Yu Tianji as if he had been a real leader, so they were convinced that his words were holy and undeniable. However, Lin Feng didn't see anyone as a leader. Everyone was equal before him. The students of Tianqi were all equal. Even if Tianji was a strong group, it didn't give them the right to humiliate others. Students who belong to the Tianji group have the same status as anyone else. Surprisingly, some people still think that it's normal to consider themselves as leaders. How servile. And yet some people are willing to accept such idiocies, said Lin Feng indifferently. Lin Feng was making fun of the servility of some people. How audacious. Did he think that he was so terrific because he had defeated someone who belonged to the Tianshu group? Yu Tianji frowned. He was staring back at Lin Feng as if he had been trying to see through him. Huh. Lin Feng frowned and he also stared at Yu Tianji aggressively. The lights twinkling in Lin Feng's eyes were so dazzling that Yu Tianji had to close his eyes. Humph. Lin Feng groaned coldly when he stared at Yu Tianji. Yu Tianji was trying to use a special skill to see through Lin Feng, see his special techniques and skills. However, that required a stronger soul than Lin Feng. But it was almost impossible for anyone at the same level as Lin Feng to compete with him. Lin Feng just had to glare at Yu Tianji in an aggressive way to make him stop. Yu Tianji quickly opened his eyes again and continued staring at Lin Feng. You broke it. This is the first time that someone at the same level as me managed to break my special clairvoyance skill. I only managed to see that his sword intent was level 4, it stopped increasing after. He might possess a level 5 sword intent. I can't see clearly. That guy is really strong. It seems like he should be considered as the leader of the Tianxian group. He is much stronger than Tianqi Shui. This time we will go to the mysterious world together, thought Yu Tianji staring at Lin Feng. After groaning again, Yu Tianji turned back to the crowd and said, We're going to the mysterious world, so let's spare no effort. Yu Tianji didn't add anything more. He was considering the fact that Lin Feng was so much stronger than Tianqi Shui. He was probably able to compete with all the strongest cultivators from the other snowy mountains. But the crowd was thinking something else. Yu Tianji had suddenly changed the topic while looking at Lin Feng. Was he simply going to let Lin Feng off without doing anything? Only Lin Feng had a definite idea of what that meant. Yu Tianji's glance had given him a clue. He wasn't going to let him off. He probably wanted to surprise attack him some other time. However, it wasn't possible at the Snow Palace. Some small tensions were allowed, but fighting fiercely in front of the elders wasn't suggested. The hunter was calmly observing the scene. Tianqi was divided into 7 mountains, and they had never prevented the geniuses from confronting each other. Only by going through such frictions could they become adults. That was precisely how geniuses stood out and became respected. Tianqi wasn't the only one with this mindset. The greatest sects and clans were all like this. There were always tensions between people in the cultivation world. Places entirely dedicated to cultivation had to be at the center of fights and tensions. This time Tianxian will not get bullied so easily, thought the hunter, feeling relieved. They would remain proud and protect their dignity. Tianqi Shui, Huang Fulong, Han Qiu, you were all very strong. They didn't fear anyone else. Besides, there was someone who could resist the so-called leaders from the other groups. Just like Yu Tianji had guessed, Lin Feng was their unofficial leader. Gong. The sound of a solemn and majestic bell spread in the air. Someone slowly came out of the Snow Palace wearing a purple Chong Pao. That was a senior cultivator of the Tianji group. He had extremely long white hair. His beard was long and went down to the chest. He looked like a celestial being, majestic and domineering. Is everyone here? Asked the person indifferently. He hadn't spoken loudly, but his voice had clearly penetrated into people's thoughts. Those who had brought the different groups to the Snow Palace all bowed and said, They are all here. All right, said the old man, glancing around at the crowd. He was looking over the 56 young people, and nodded with satisfaction. Tianqi doesn't prevent you from fighting against each other because battles and tensions help you maintain your ardor and keep you hot-blooded. You become stronger in your heart when you argue. Tianqi is divided into 7 groups, so it is normal that tensions appear. No matter how you fight, there will be no consequences. But I have to remind you, this time you're going to the mysterious world, and Tianqi will not be the only group to send people there. There will be other people from the region of Ganyu. There will be some terrifying geniuses there, and none of them will be weaker than you. Therefore, I hope that you will not fight against each other in the mysterious world. You must forget about the small tensions existing between you, said the old man slowly. Am I clear? Understood, said everyone, nodding. The old man nodded and put his right hand on his chest. Then he slightly bowed and said in a solemn way, Everything for the Tianqi Empire. The crowd did the same. Everybody put their right hand on their heart, bowed and said, Everything for the Tianqi Empire. Everything for the Tianqi Empire. Gong. The calm and solemn sound of a bell resonated in the air again. That bell was ringing to remind people that they were missionaries of Tianqi. Everything was for the Tianqi Empire. No matter how serious the inner tensions were, people had to remember that their ultimate goal was to make the empire stronger. They were a big family, the empire supported them and they supported the empire. That was why the Tianqi Empire was such a strong empire. The solemn and relieving sound of the bell resonated in Lin Feng's head. He also raised his right hand and put it on his chest while saying, Everything for the Tianqi Empire. The excitement of being a missionary was improving his determination and willpower even further. He felt like he belonged to a cohesive group. The sense of belonging to a group was influencing everybody in a positive way. That sense of belonging was penetrating deeply into their souls. Everybody felt like they were brothers and sisters. They had to maintain the cohesion to remain strong together. The old man with the white beard glanced at Lin Feng and smiled. He had noticed that Lin Feng was different from the others, but at that moment Lin Feng was accepting to become a part of that big family. He was letting that cohesive force influence his heart. He had accepted Tianqi and participated with mindset of improving the empire. That way the Tianqi Empire would engulf more and more geniuses. Chapter 764. Taboo. The old man with the white beard looked around and said, "All right, you're the most outstanding geniuses of Tianqi. Get ready to go on a journey." The crowd looked at him respectfully. They were finally going to traverse the mysterious world. Many of them had been preparing for such a long time. This time they were going on an adventure, a journey. That journey was going to be filled with dangers and opportunities. Afterward, they would come back to Tianqi as heroes. They might even come back with more determination and with great treasures. However, they might never come. Their bodies would slowly decompose in the mysterious world. This might be their last chance to see these snowy mountains. However, everybody looked determined to give it a try. Nobody was going to stutter. They had chosen this path. Since they had chosen to become strong cultivators, they had to walk forwards with indomitable will. Death and dangers were part of that journey. Strong cultivators had to face dangers bravely. There was no space for cowards on the path of cultivation. The old man called Mr. Baisu. Then he slowly raised his head to the sky, raised his hand, and in a flash a terrifying quantity of snow energy started rotating in the sky. Eoa! A few sounds spread in the air off in the distance. The snowflakes suddenly turned into a vortex as whistling sounds spread in the air. Bestial qi. Lin Feng was stupefied. There was bestial qi in the air. He raised his head and saw 7 snowy white beasts in the sky. They had gigantic wings which created hurricanes as they clapped. Those 7 beasts were eagles, and they were glancing at the crowd on the ground. Their eyes looked like those of beasts, but at the same time revealed the intelligence of wise beings. "Snow eagles, come down," said Mr. Baisu indifferently. Then the 7 beasts came down from the sky and disappeared. They had transformed into human beings. Those were Tian-level beasts that could transform into human beings. However, those beasts had chosen the half-transformation option, where they keep their 2 forms instead of turning into authentic human beings. Those snow eagles still had their wings projecting from their back when they transformed into humans. "The snow eagles will bring you to the mysterious world," said Mr. Baisu. The 7 snow eagles made a line and turned into eagles again. Then they crouched down and waited for the cultivators to jump onto their backs. "Go," said Mr. Baisu. The crowd bowed and then jumped onto the backs of the eagles. Each group had their own eagle. Clap, clap, clap. The snow eagles clapped their wings and a strong wind started blowing again. The 7 white eagles then rose up in the air and reached the clouds. "We're off," thought Lin Feng while looking at the ground. Some people were looking up at them excited. The snow eagles flew even faster as they went off into the distance. Surprisingly, nobody else is coming with us, thought Lin Feng. There were only the 56 geniuses and the 7 beasts. Nobody else was accompanying them while they were flying. But he quickly forgot about it. Lin Feng wasn't going to focus on the small things. Tianqi had its own policies and ways of doing things. In any case, nothing could happen to them. "Are you cold?" asked Lin Feng to Xue Linglong in a low voice. The wind was extremely strong and they were very high in the air. Besides, the speed of Tian-level beasts was incredible. Xue Linglong's small paws were on Lin Feng's chest and she slightly shook her head. She looked delighted. One could see it from her eyes. She didn't look sad to be a beast again. She could stay in Lin Feng's arms all the time. Actually, the happy expression in her eyes was even more resplendent than in the past. Even though she was small, Lin Feng's pure qi was surrounding her body to prevent any sufferings from the strong winds. Being in Lin Feng's arms gave birth to warm, sweet and tender feelings in her heart. Isn't it only a beast? Asked someone indifferently yet mockingly. He slowly turned his head and looked at Bai Li Shi. He was just looking at the landscape below them. He was pretending that he had never said anything. Who are you talking to? Asked Lin Feng coldly. He was glaring at Bai Li Shi, who was only a few steps in front of him. Lin Feng's eyes looked as sharp as swords. Bai Li Shi remained silent as if he hadn't heard Lin Feng. He was previously paying attention to Lin Feng back when he heard Lin Feng talking to a beast as if he had been talking to his wife or his girlfriend. He couldn't help but take a jab. However, he regretted it when he remembered how Lin Feng had defeated and injured the strong cultivator of Tianshu. Now he was ignoring Lin Feng, hoping that he would forget about it. I am asking you a question, shouted Lin Feng furiously. His voice made Bai Li Shi's heart shake. Even if he wanted to escape, it was impossible on these birds. Bai Li Shi turned his head and looked at Lin Feng, scared. Lin Feng, don't forget the purpose of our trip, said Tian Qixue when she saw that Lin Feng was furious. Lin Feng slowly turned around and looked at Tian Qixue. He slightly opened his mouth, showing his teeth as he said, "You shut the hell up." Tian Qixue was speechless. Lin Feng was releasing a scary ice-cold energy. He looked extremely furious. Nobody could humiliate Ming Qing, no matter who they were. Tian Qixue looked at Huang Fulong. He was lying down and his eyes were closed. It was as if he had heard nor seen anything. Lin Feng, you're really going too far. It's only a wild beast, isn't it? Asked Bai Li Shi. At the very second he finished the last word of his sentence, he saw Lin Feng arrive next to him and a terrifying oppressive energy surrounded his body. Bai Li Shi raised his hand to block, but he just heard the sound of some cracking bones. A terrifying coldness invaded his entire body and he couldn't breathe anymore. He couldn't even gulp down. His eyes seemed like they were going to burst out of their orbits. All of this because Lin Feng had grabbed him by the throat and was slowly raising him up in the air. Huang Fulong slowly opened his eyes. The 6 others were looking at Lin Feng and shivering. That guy was really scary when he was angry. He didn't care about giving face to anyone. Bai Li Shi was a genius, but he was a weakling in front of Lin Feng. Talking about that beast is taboo. Lin Feng cares about it a lot. Everyone was understanding. Bai Li Shi grabbed Lin Feng's hand with his hands and tried to pry him off. His eyes were bloodshot and his face was red. Flames of fury were burning in Lin Feng's eyes. This time I will let you off. However, if you dare offend me again, even if it means making Tenchi furious, I will kill you, said Lin Feng coldly. He particularly stressed the word kill. The atmosphere cold and people were all shivering. They could sense Lin Feng's murderous intentions. He wasn't threatening Bai Li Shi, he was making him a promise. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.